Karen Corey, for you that don't know me, and for those that do, you're very welcome, and we hope you have a fantastic engaging day this morning, this afternoon. Just a little bit of housekeeping and a few welcomes, and we'll hand you over to our MC for the day. So I'd just like to say a special welcome to all of those who have travelled here today from Vancouver Island, from Belfast, from Dublin, Brussels, and from north, south, east, and west of the Atlantic Gateway. You're very welcome, and hope you have a fantastic day. We have a fantastic lineup of speakers and a very packed morning, so we'll get going straight away. This would not be possible without our sponsors, so I want to say a very big thank you to them. There are a lot of sponsors out in the foyer, so please spend some time chatting to them, and again we thank them sincerely for all the work they've done in putting on today. We were talking last night and we mentioned about that it's a city of festivals, and that Galway is a city of festivals, from the Galway Arts Festival, Science and Technology Festival, music festivals, and science, and I mentioned that one. And now here we have the AtlanTec Festival in its 10th year, so it's a fantastic achievement, and thank you for all the support over the years. Just want to mention, please, if you're hashtag, use the hashtag Atlantic. There are emergency exits. There are two on your left, one at the bottom of the hall and one here at the top, and at the other end of the hall as well. There's one at the bottom of the hall, and there's one just here in case of an emergency. And there's an evacuation procedure outside the main building, so please go outside. So another thing is that we're a region of technology now, and we have a region of tribes. And we just want to say that our mission is to promote and strengthen and grow and upskill the region. And we do this with tribes of people who are here today and have been here throughout the year, helping and promoting AtlanTec and the forums, etc. And Sharon will go into a little more detail about that. I'd like to welcome the President of the University of Galway, Professor Kieran O'Reilly. I'd like to welcome our Advisory Board and our Chair, Sharon Walsh from Fidelity Investments. So our MC for the day is Sarah McInerney. So Sarah is a prominent broadcaster and journalist, and she's working with Primetime in RTE. I'm sure you're all aware of her. She's an extensive experience in media and brings a wealth of knowledge and experience and an understanding of all the issues at hand and the power of communication. And her works not only informed but also shaped public discourse and national issues. So without further ado, folks, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'd like to welcome you to Sarah McInerney. Thank you.
Caroline, thank you so much for that introduction, and good morning everyone. I'm really delighted to be here this morning. I normally look for any excuse I can to get back to Galway, and today is a wonderful excuse because not only the topic is really, really interesting, but also the speakers that we've lined up today are really, really interesting. It is a very poorly kept secret that journalists as a group, with some notable exceptions, are pretty inept when it comes to technology. We don't know an awful lot about it. We're proud users generally of Microsoft Word, proficient in that, that's pretty okay, the 2008 version. But beyond that, not so much. You're regarded as a technological whiz kid in the newsroom if you can work the printer. You are even better if you can make the printer print on both sides, which I managed to do actually, so I'm delighted with myself on the way down here yesterday evening. But despite our lack of ability when it comes to technology, we are very aware as an industry of the importance, obviously, of technology, but more specifically, particularly in the last couple of years, the power of technology and the rapid change that's happening, particularly when it comes to AI. And I had a really interesting conversation with Jeffrey Hinton. I'm sure a lot of you are aware of him, the so-called godfather of AI. He was on Drive Time with me a couple of weeks ago, and he really painted this very dystopian picture of his concerns about AI and what could happen if it's not managed correctly and created correctly, I suppose, more importantly at the start, in terms of what can happen. But he also spoke a little bit to the potential power of AI in our lives to do good, in education and health and in our work and all of that. And I know that our speakers today are going to be speaking an awful lot to that, to how we can harness the power of AI and how it can really work for us in our lives. So I'm really, really interested to hear that. I'll be taking lots of notes. So I know, as Caroline mentioned there, we have a really packed schedule today. You don't want to hear from me because I don't know an awful lot about this topic. I am here to learn. So we're going to hear now from the president of Oscail na Gaillimhe, Ciarán O'Hogarty, who has been president of the University of Galway since 2018. We were just discussing there, we went to the same school together at one point. Ciarán was Professor of Accounting and Dean of Business at UCD before taking up his current role. And in this role as president, he's been one of the driving forces behind the development of the university's strategic plan, shared vision shaped by values. And he's had a really, really significant impact on the university during his term in office thus far. So please do welcome now Ciarán O'Hogarty.
Sarah, thank you all very much. Ní mag agus sa féin seo agus as for níirtí agus for an héic that we've got good seo. As Sarah mentioned, I'm Ciarán O'Hogarty, president of the university. I'll be brief because I know you have a lot of program ahead of you. But Sarah mentioned the values of the university and the strategy. And when we started the strategy 4 to 5 years ago, we were very keen that it be values-based. The best book I've ever read on strategy is Simon Sinek's Start With Why. So we started with why. Why are we here? And we identified that we're here for the public good, for our students, our society and our planet, and then underpinned by values. And that was quite a difference remarked upon at the time in basing our strategy on values, on being human beings, how we be rather than how we do. And we identified 4 values: respect, openness, excellence and sustainability, which would permeate everything we do. And this conference is very much in keeping with that. First of all, for the public good. Secondly, thinking about how we might make a difference for society and our planet and our students. But thirdly, that sense of respect for the evidence, respect for each other, respect for ourselves, openness to new ideas. And I think that's something that we were very keen on here to emphasise, is the sense that we should be open to critique, open to debate, open to opportunities, as Sarah mentioned, for example, AI. And I know here we're particularly, and I would hear from Mike Madden, who are particularly keen on that sense of looking at AI from a critical perspective, but seeing opportunities and seeing challenges, but seeing those opportunities nonetheless. And we work very closely with the hospital system here, and certainly in that context there are things like diagnostics and other creative technologies that here we're very keen on, the connected health, digital health, all of those areas in which we can improve patient health and well-being. And that's something, again, from our sense of openness, this conference fits into that very nicely as well, because we have, I always say, a university with no gates. I used to walk through here, I grew up in my part of Newcastle, used to walk through here into town, but I know others didn't, they walked along the walls. One of the things I've been very keen on since I became president is that this university belongs to everybody. Whatever you can feel it is theirs, they can walk through, it's part of their furniture. And this conference, AtlanTec, has been very much part of that over the years. That sense that you make this your own. And this place, not only today, but more generally, we're open to working with you. Our innovation office, Ruth Hines, is here as our gateway to working with the university in this context. And we're particularly keen to engage with policymakers, with civic society, with industry and the economic context in which we sit. The ecosystem here is very strong. The university sees itself as very much part of it, but we see ourselves as we have no gates. Our walls are permeable, and we want to be very much a university that people have a sense of belonging to and with. And then the third value we have is excellence, high standard in everything that we do, so that becomes routine. And that is very much to me allied with respect. If we respect for each other and ourselves, we do our best work. And there's no inconsistency between having that sense of respect and that expectation of high standards for ourselves and for others. And then finally, the standard of the quality and value of sustainability. Again, this conference is very much part of that, has sustained itself over 10 years, is part of sustaining a community more broadly, part of sustaining technologies, and clearly in the context of sustaining our planet, a lot of technologies have a really important role to play in that. So at the top of this Bailey Allen Hall, we have sun panels, solar panels, which over the last week or so have been generating most of the electricity for this building and others. We have a geofish, which is just south of the engineering building, just north of the bridge, which is again doing a lot of good work on heating the swimming pool, the School of Engineering at the Aylesbury building. So a lot of the technology that we've introduced here is, again, we are a test bed for new technology and engagement within that context, but also the sense that we're here to sustain each other and the planet. And we are #1 in Ireland, ranked by the Times Higher for sustainability, top 10 in Europe. And we're very keen on the role that we play, not only in doing research and our teaching and learning, but also in engaging with the community more broadly in that sustainability agenda. But this particular conference is part of that sustainability also. I always think here we're sustaining new generations, sustaining communities. And that theme of the conference today and over the last week or so, that sense of community and community engagement, sustaining communities through technology, is very much in keeping with that sense of ourselves that the university has. And we thank you for that, but becoming greatly of something of And we did a survey recently of both the idea of the values and the values themselves, looking forward to our next strategy. And I was pleasantly surprised that first of all, the values were seen as very important and very valuable, underpinning of our strategy. The 4 values were seen as very worthy and good in themselves, and that we've made progress on all 4 over the last 5 years. And then we asked, what other value or what other tone or theme would you like to have in the context of the next strategy? And the one word which came forward, which is the one word which also sits here today, is belonging. That sense that there is now a longing for belonging, whether it's because of social media, because of COVID, because of the disunited world we have and the disagreements and disagreeable world we often have, that there is a sense that people now have that need for belonging and that sense of belonging and that longing for belonging. And this conference has captured that very much over the years and captures that today as well. And we'd like to work with you in engaging more in that sense that technology doesn't set us apart but brings us together. And I commend the work that's been done. A lot of the themes, a lot of the presentations over the next day or so are related to that idea that technology actually brings us together and creates communities. Communities that have respect for each other, that are open to each other and to opening to engagement in new ideas, that have high standards in everything that they do, and that sustain communities for the future with that sense of belonging together and belonging with each other that is so often needed in society right now. So Tracy and Liv, from Deadly Cottagood, it's your 10th anniversary. It's great to see such a good turnout, great to see such fantastic teams and interest in this area. And University of Galway welcomes you to Fáilteoirí and also it's Liv Shalom Show. This is your university. We are not an inanimate institution, we are animated communities like yourselves. And we're open to working with you. A university with no gates. You'll be honored. Thank you.
Kieran, thank you so much for the inspiring speech. A university with no gates is just a vision that I can absolutely get on board with. It's a really beautiful idea. We're going to hear now from Sharon Walsh, who is Senior Vice President in Technology at Fidelity Investments. And Sharon leads an organisation of more than 250 technologists delivering solutions for asset management out of Ireland. And she joined Fidelity Investments in 1997 in Boston, one of my favourite cities, one of my favourite US cities, and she's held a range of technology leadership positions across several of Fidelity's US businesses before Ireland called, and she returned to Ireland to Fidelity in 2013. After several years involved with ITAG's board and holding the position of Vice Chair, Sharon was then appointed Board Chair this year. So please do welcome Sharon Walsh.
As the new chair of ITAG, I would love to welcome you all to the 2024 AtlanTec Festival and Conference. This particular event stands at the heart and intersection of the technological innovation and community engagement that we have here in the region. This year, we're proud to celebrate the 10th anniversary of ITAG's leading initiative, a decade of groundbreaking advancements and collaborative successes. And 2024 sees ITAG celebrating its 24 years in existence, and I'm very grateful to be the chair for the next number of years. As an alumni of the university, I would like to take this opportunity to thank the University of Galway, in particular the President, Kieran O'Doherty, Ruth Hines, University Industry Liaison for the AtlanTec Festival, as technology doesn't serve me well here, hold on a second. David Murphy and Fiona Neary from the Technology Transfer and Innovation Office, Alma McCarthy, the J.B. Carnes School of Business and Economics, and especially Professor Michael Madden and his team in the School of Computer Science for hosting and supporting the AtlanTec Festival Conference for several years. An event like today does not come together without many months of planning, and we'd like to thank the AtlanTec Festival Forum members for all their hard work to make today such a success. And thank you to all our member companies who have hosted events over the last 2 weeks as part of the festival, and we have several events continuing well into next week. And of course, I would be very remiss if I would not thank the efforts of the ITAC team themselves, Caroline D, Joe, Eve, Sheila and Keelan. A special thank you to our regional partners, ATU Galway, ATU Donegal, IT Sligo, Athlone, Shannon and Limerick. And to our 170 regional member companies who are the backbone of our thriving community. Your collaborative spirit is the driving force behind our collective achievements. We would also like to extend our deepest gratitude to our sponsors, whose generous support has made this festival a showcase of dynamic capabilities and thought leadership along the Atlantic Gateway. Your contributions continue to ignite progress and inspire all of us committed to this sector, and we could not do this without your continued support. Our theme this year is connecting communities through through technology innovation, and it encapsulates our ongoing commitment to not only embracing technological landscapes, but also fostering the essential human connections that drive our industry forward. Today is more than just technology. It's about building networks, sharing knowledge, expanding educational horizons within and beyond our vibrant tech ecosystem. The vibrancy of ITAC's community is not just evident on days like today, but ongoing throughout the year with the many activities and events that take place across our wide-ranging forums within ITAC. These forums are the lifeblood of this amazing community we call ITAC, and it is only made possible by the commitment of our members who ensure their ongoing relevance and vibrancy for the community. This year, we are honoured to collaborate with Data to Sustain and work in partnership with the Western Development Commission, our European partners on the Interreg project AI Policy for SMEs. Some of our board members are currently in Vienna at the launch of this programme, making the beginning of a promising 4-year journey. We eagerly anticipate the wealth of insights and developments this collaboration will bring, and we look forward to welcoming our European delegates to Ireland during the project's tenure. In an era where technology reshapes our world with each passing moment, the AtlanTec Conference stands at the forefront, spotlighting critical domains such as AI, cybersecurity, cloud computing, and generative AI. As these technologies continue to advance at an unprecedented pace, the gap between emerging tech capabilities and available skills is becoming more apparent. This conference is dedicated to addressing the challenge by unlocking the skill gap, ensuring that the workforce is prepared to meet the demands of tomorrow. Through a series of expert-led panels, workshops and discussions, the AtlanTec Conference provides a platform for innovation, learning and connection, empowering professionals and businesses alike to harness the full potential of digital technologies. As we delve into these crucial topics, the conference not only reflects on how our world is changing through technology, but also how it actively shapes the future of these developments. As you navigate today's sessions, I encourage each of you to fully engage, ask questions, participate in discussions, and connect with fellow attendees. The opportunities for growth and innovation are boundless when we come together, ready to learn and share. Let us move forward with the spirit of innovation that characterises the AtlanTec community. Together we will break barriers and create a future where technology not only connects, but also enriches our community. Thank you for being here today, and let's make this a conference a memorable and transformative experience, and please enjoy your day. Thank you.
Sharon, thank you so much for that warm welcome and for highlighting the really critical role of technology in driving business forward. Very exciting to see as well how Fidelity Investments is shaping the future of technology. Now, I am really excited to hear from our next speaker today, our keynote speaker, Peter Scott. Now, Peter is a futurist, a coach, and a consultant who helps people from all walks of life understand and leverage artificial intelligence. After receiving a master's degree in computer science from Cambridge University, he moved to California to work for NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, and he now lives on Vancouver Island. He's come here especially to speak to us today. He's host to the weekly podcast Artificial Intelligence and You, and that tackles three key questions which I think a lot of us want answered, which is what is AI, that's for me, why will it affect you, and how do you and your business survive and thrive through the AI revolution? Really, really interesting questions and really interesting answers, no doubt. His company, Next Wave Institute, coaches executives on how to future-proof their careers and businesses, and Peter's now working with schools. Another really interesting aspect, I suppose, is the future on how to retool educational methods and content to adapt to AI. We hope to also have a quick chance for Q&A after Peter has spoken, so if you do have any questions, keep them in mind, and we'll try to get to you once Peter's finished up, okay? Please welcome Peter Scott.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mike, for the invitation. Thank you, Caroline, wherever you are, for getting me here. And thank you all, the amazing team, for what an amazing conference this is shaping up to be. I'm really happy for the welcome that you've given me. And I'm here to talk about the future of work. I just got to wonder, how many people are suffering from future of work fatigue? It seems to be everywhere. Talks, blog posts, videos, articles, so much about this topic. How much is it helping? We have a lot to engage with this. And of course, the most important question for most people is not the future of work in general, but the future of their work, right? And what I find just about everywhere I go is that this is the number one thing on people's mind. What is the future of their job? Is it safe? Even among people, you would say they're safe. They're relatively immune. They have little to be concerned about in the future. This is still what's going on for them. And keynote speakers are not immune to this. And the arrival of ChatGPT had three impacts on my work. First, I had to explain many times why I and other keynote speakers and futurists had not seen ChatGPT coming, at least not so soon. Secondly, and most annoyingly, I had to change half of my slides. And third, I started asking myself a question before I would talk that just about every speaker from that point on should have been asking themselves, which was, what answers can I give you that ChatGPT cannot? A serious kind of question. And I don't like this question. I don't like it because the answer is a list that keeps shrinking. Every day, someone wakes up at DeepMind or OpenAI or Anthropic and comes up with a way of knocking another thing off the list. This is not good for my blood pressure or my career prospects. So I did what any good politician would do. I pretended it was a different question. What can I give you that is better than answers? I like this. I like this a lot. Because it's easy to answer. I'm not giving you answers. It must be questions. Well, all right, we'll do some answers along the way, but the questions are going to be more important. And in retrospect, this is not surprising. This is because of the first question we're going to look at, which is, what is the difference between a human being and a large language model? Sounds a bit like one's a raven like a writing desk. But it's a question that's vexingly hard to answer. Once you get past the trivial difference that one of them has a body and the other one doesn't, it looks like you're left with that shrinking list that I just mentioned, with one crucial difference. We command, the large language models respond. We request, they supply. We ask, they answer. We're the ones asking the questions. They don't respond until we prompt them. In a very real sense, they don't even exist until we ask a question. So we, the human beings, are the ones asking the questions. Now, I know you can ask ChatGPT to write 100 questions on every topic and it will come up with those as fast as it can type them. That's not the same thing. That's writing questions. I'm talking about asking questions. See, when human beings ask questions like, how are diseases spread? And how can we protect against infection? And how could we live longer? These are not just some strings of text floating out in the world. These change the world. We change the world when we live in questions. So if asking questions is what makes us human, then what makes us more human is asking better questions. So let's see if we can ask some good ones. Now let me start out with one I already gave you, which is, why didn't I and other futurists see ChatGPT coming that soon? And if I wanted to redeem myself on this a little bit, I would point out that in 2017, I wrote a book about AI that opened with a fictional chapter that was set in a future where the world was beset by a pandemic, evolving through multiple strains, and there were AIs that could have realistic conversations with you and write software to order. Sound familiar? Not bad, huh? Unfortunately, I set that in the year 2027, and I thought that was going out on a limb, so it doesn't redeem me that much. So, let's look at this business of predictions. How do we use predictions? It was working. No, that's an intentionally blank slide. Sometimes I have a blank slide because I don't have anything up there that's worth looking at more than me, so. Sorry. That's just one of those things. So let's start with one I already gave you. Why didn't we see those questions coming? And like I said, it doesn't redeem me very much. So how do we use predictions? And this is where this should work. It was working. Right?
It's not working now.
Here we go. Well, let's see. I did that with my finger. So we make predictions, or we pay expensive consultants to make predictions, so that we can then make plans. Go over here now. No. Want to try back up? And then we prepare ourselves to execute the plan. So, yeah. This one was. Okay. All right, fingers crossed. So maybe you look up the weather forecast for tomorrow, find out that it's predicted to be sunny, make a plan to go hike on Mara, prepare by doing a carbo load or brushing up your hiking boots, then it rains anyway. Okay, so that's not a very consequential failure for prediction, but we make plenty bigger ones. See, it turns out that we suck at prediction. For instance, the physicist, all right, it's going to have to be, yep. Ernest Rutherford said in 1933 that splitting the atom, which two of his students had done the previous year, would never lead to any significant energy release, and anyone claiming otherwise was talking moonshine. This so annoyed Leo Szilard that when he read it, he figured out how to do it the same day. And in 1901, this gentleman said it would be 50 years before a heavier-than-air flying machine was built. 2 years later, Orville and Wilbur Wright were building them. This is what we're right. And he went on to say, this demonstration of my inability as a prophet gave me such a shock that I have ever since refrained from all prediction, and an indictment of the whole prediction business. Smart man. And a little closer to home, 10 years ago, the futurists were telling anyone who would listen, and quite a few people who didn't, that the jobs that would be safest in the near future would, one, be creatives, like artists, writers, musicians, poets, and two, experts in human emotional interaction, like therapists. Well, we know where that has gone. Not all writers, poets, therapists, jobs are going to be threatened, but some of them have already gone, particularly in the entry levels. Yet we continue to make predictions, even though we suck at them, because this process says we need to. Now, I submit that this has our priorities exactly backwards from what we should be doing most of the time. And we can see why when we look at these actions from the perspective of the future focus. See, prediction is a future focus on what will the world do. Planning is a future focus on what will I do. And preparation is a future focus on who will I be. And which one of these is most important? Which one, more importantly, do you have the most control over? I want us to break our dependency on predictions that mostly don't work anyway. I'm not saying we should stop making predictions altogether. In fact, they're essential for life. If I go to pick up this remote that hasn't been doing what I want today, as I go towards it, neurologically, my muscles are sending constant feedback to my brain about where my arm is, and when I touch it, my nerves give feedback at the same time, and if at any point along that attempt it doesn't match, then I instantly readjust until the predictions do match. If you go to pick up something, a hammer, and then you discover that it's a cake that someone made to look like a hammer, you have a sudden shock because the prediction didn't match, and then instantly you readjust, and everything's all right again. So predictions are vital when you get rapid enough feedback, and then they're useful. For longer time scales, we should be training ourselves to use this process instead, because it tells us how to ask better questions. So take a question like, what is the future of education? Which is something I get asked a lot and I'm dealing with in many schools right now. It's a good question, right? Our speaker says so. But we don't want to sell for good, right? We want better. Where is this question in our process? Well, it's prediction. A better question would be, how do I plan for the disruption of education? But you're not going to settle for that, right? You're on the wrong. So an even better question would be, who do I need to be in a future of disrupted education? And the important thing here is that now we have some agency, we have more control, we can do something about this instead of being at the mercy of the people making predictions. So agency is important, especially when we consider people who are outside the bubble of technology. I'm going to say that we here are on the inside of the bubble because it's a technology conference, right? There's a world out there of people who don't get it. And so even though we don't really know what's going to happen next with AI, even the people who are front and center of building it don't really know. And even when we're developing it, we don't have control of that industry. We feel on the inside. We feel like we have a say in the matter. We have chosen to be part of the technology game. But the people on the outside, the tech bubble, try and make sense of a world where AI is magical and exploding. They are terrified. This is the thing that I need people in technology to understand the most, is this division. So those people feel like feel like they're in the backseat of the car being driven 100 miles an hour down the motorway by some teenager who's chugging a ball nose and turning around to yell, "I have no idea where we're going, but isn't that fun?" See, to them, we are that teenager. That's the difference in not having agency makes. So let's try this question thing again. Okay, we got a lot of work to do to improve on this, so we'll come back to it. Let's talk about our vision of the future of work. We've long been chasing a particular vision of the future of work that looks something like this. And going back to the Jetsons, right? This is actually notable for the fact that human being isn't doing any work at all, which I think is like an overreaction to our current situation, which looks and feels more like this. And the only real development over the last 50 years has been that instead of stacks of paper, we now have emails and instant messaging and travel tickets, which, since they don't have to fit on the desk, are even more. And so that makes us want to get as far away from this as we can. So we wouldn't mind if the robots were doing all the work, right? So here's a really important question. Are we getting closer to our desired vision of the future of work? And the more we look at this, the more uncomfortable we might feel. Because we might not want to admit to ourselves that we've been moving in the wrong direction. What if we're getting further away instead of closer? Now, those of us in IT have long been used to spreading certain, lies among ourselves. Like, we're 90% done. I'll document it later. The code is self-explanatory, and of course, it works for me. Have you tried turning it off and back on, and so forth. We said these things often enough that we come to believe them ourselves. So it wouldn't be surprising that if we've also gotten used to a certain level of self-deception about whether technology was actually giving us back more time. Now let's consider the inventions of email, which created enough distance between us that we could assume that everyone was available all the time. Social media, which actually created more social distance. Word processors, which created the expectation that every document, no matter how trivial or mundane, would be perfectly formatted. And retail productivity, having automated just about the last task left. So where have we arrived at? So, by a show of hands, how many people have enough time to do all the things that you want to do? How many of you have enough time to do all the things you need to do? Put your hand up if you hope that one day AI will make it possible for you to do all of the things that you need to do. And the good thing about this is that it's telling no matter what the answer is, right? See, we've been pursuing something that's either not getting any closer or is actually getting further away. And you know, once upon a time, technology was the slower one in our partnership with it. It was like dragging a 3-year-old through an airport trying to make our flight. Come on, hurry up. Store my files faster, send my emails faster, dial my calls faster. But now the tables are turned. Technology's caught up. Now we're the 3-year-old. The faster it moves, the faster we move. Alarm goes off, you get up, the microwave pings, you eat. Siri says, time to go to work, you leave. The car says, turn left here, you do it. The phone rings, you answer it. Email arrives, you read it. Studies show that 81% of US employees read work emails during non-business hours. That the more technologically developed a country is, the faster its pace of life. That we're walking 10% faster than we used to 10 years ago. And over 40% of our days spent multitasking. So where have we made machines that treat us like human beings, and where have we made them to treat us like API endpoints? It's all too easy for us to lie to ourselves about our productivity, but this is where we really need to be honest with ourselves, because if in our quest to have technology improve our work-life balance, if that's backfired, then what's going to happen when we try to improve it with AI, which accelerates everything it touches? What if instead of improving that work-life balance, it makes it far worse? What will we have committed? Which outcome would be better upon happening right now? Look, I'm as invested in AI improving our lives as anyone out there. I want to be on the beach, right? I need that, and I want the robots to be doing that, and I believe that we can make that happen, but it's not going to happen by default. We have to make a change in viewpoint. So I'm worried that I am going to be instead trapped into doing things like updating my models for my agents or fixing interface bugs. But this is what Star Trek gets wrong, because it shows a ship where everything works perfectly. None of the systems have any bugs. And if it was accurate, the scenario would be more like, Scotty, why are the engines stopped? Captain, I can't help it. The antimatter model update is incompatible with the home controller new version. It's doing a hard reboot. Don't expect a perfect accent here. But Scotty, there are Klingons coming. Captain, there's nothing I can do with the engines running FS check. I was thinking I might want to see that episode, but on the second thoughts, it might be too close to home. So if you don't want to find out how much faster technology can force you to run around a hamster wheel, then we need to ask, how can we make AI that saves us time? I know we put our hands on our hearts and swear, of course our products save people time. That's why we're doing that. That's what they're for. But are they really saving time in one place only to take it away in another, like smartphones that give us the freedom to work from anywhere and the obligation to work from everywhere? Or are they saving time in execution only to take it away in life cycle cost, like cost to acquire, investigate, install, configure, repair, maintain, update, and then a hideous penalty if we should ever want to migrate to another vendor's version of the same product. Now this becomes easier to answer if we take it on personally. As I said, I believe it's possible, but we can't expect it to happen automatically. It takes a collective shift in our viewpoint to make it happen. We're not ready to come back to this question of the future of work yet. We'll leave that to the end. So the next question, when will we have artificial general intelligence? And how much ink has been spilled on this one, right? Yet, no one knows what artificial general intelligence is. And yet they do want to stop, either have it straight away or stop it from ever happening at all. And there's no test for it, but every time someone does come up with a test that they claim would validate the presence of an AGI, our current AIs learn how to pass that test and nothing else. And so we declare, well, that's not really AGI after all. So to recap, we haven't decided what AGI is. We don't have a test for it. The definitions for it are so vague that people often go outside of those and confuse it with artificial superintelligence, and now think that it's the point at which AI becomes godlike. Yet this doesn't stop pundits and forecasters from making specific predictions of when AGI will arrive, even though no one knows what a general AI system is. So we love nothing more than to argue about the meanings of words that have been tossed around for centuries without the slightest clue how to define them, like intelligence, consciousness, sentience, self-awareness, free will, creativity, my favorite, understanding. And that would be right. We could just leave those questions to philosophers to keep arguing about for another 100 years while we got on with real work. except that almost certainly in the next 5 years, a court will be asked to decide whether an AI has one or more of these things. Courts, not usually as patient as philosophers. So let's apply our question transformation formula. When will AI become intelligent, conscious, all of those things, etc.? Good question. Better question. What does all of that mean? Let's agree on that first. Even better question. How do we prepare for those things? Now, I know you can't realistically prepare for a future where court has decided that AI above a certain compute level is sentient, therefore entitled to human rights, therefore you have to get court permission before you can even turn it off. No, there are people thinking about that now, but it's not a productive use of the time to join them. What will impact us more, though, is the level of public conversation about that escalating, as it will only continue to do. So maybe you want to decide that your AIs will remain narrow and never be part of that conversation. Or maybe you decide you want some first mover advantage and to move into that conversation and to develop and deploy emotionally sensitive customer service agents. By the way, if you want an example of something that was a joke 5 years ago and is now a business plan, emotionally sensitive customer service agents. Now, all this talk about how we're going in the wrong direction with technology is kind of depressing. I only bring that because it's true, but it still doesn't give us the agency we need to do something about this. So let me put another question out there. What are the limits to human understanding? While this is hard to measure, certain facts are inarguable. One, the demands on our cognition are increasing exponentially. Two, our brains ain't getting any bigger. For instance, the number of peer-reviewed papers doubles every 10 to 15 years, sooner in some fields. In fact, during the time I'm speaking to you, we can expect on average 20 papers in oncology alone to be published, which means that if you're a cancer researcher, you can either spend all of your time trying to just skim the abstracts alone of the papers in your field, or you can do, actual research. Because what's not going up is the speed at which human beings read. No question. What are the limits to human understanding? Good question. Better question. What could increase human understanding rates? Even better question. How can we use AI to do that? Now, there's a theory in philosophy. It's called the extended mind thesis by Professors Chalmers and Clark. And basically what he says is that cognition isn't confined to what goes on in our brains. If we use some device in the pursuit of solving a problem, then we should consider that to be part of our minds. And when they came out with this theory, they used notebooks as the example of those devices, because they were philosophers, not technologists, and plus this was 1998. Nowadays, we would say that, of course, the exemplar of that role is a smartphone. But that clearly hasn't been enough to help us understand scientific papers faster. All it's done is make it easier to generate them faster and inundate ourselves with them. And cognitively, for human beings, this is like trying to build a bridge across the corridor with a wheelbarrow and a pile of bricks. We need the cognitive equivalents of helicopters, and bulldozers, and cranes. And just in the nick of time, along come large language models to provide understanding as a service. Now, we don't think of them that way yet. We're still stuck in this shiny thing phase, but this is what we have to do to deal with the flood of content that's just been accelerated God knows how much by the large language models themselves. We have to figure out how to use these LLMs as extensions of our minds, in the same way that an expert piano player or tennis player uses a piano or tennis racket as an extension of their body. And there's one question that will come up over and over again around LLMs as they get closer and closer to embodying those qualities like consciousness and so forth, which will guide you through countless arguments, and that is, what's the difference between a convincing imitation and the real thing? This is going to show up whenever the question of does AI really understand something comes up. See, if we're talking about the difference between, say, almonds and imitation almond extract, well, you can taste the difference. If you get imitation extract is so good that you can't taste the difference, you can detect the difference with light spectroscopy or something. But now suppose, instead of almonds, we're talking about a chess game. I don't mean a board and pieces, I mean an actual game like Fischer versus Spassky, 1972, Game 7, the description of the moves that happened. Well, seems like an odd sort of thing, right? I mean, what you have then is either a perfect copy that's indistinguishable from anything else, or you don't have anything at all. So the question is going to come up, are consciousness and so forth, I think more like almonds or a chess game. Now, it may not be phrased that way, but this is what that court will be confronting. Are those qualities computational / informational abstractions, or do they depend upon some physical manifestation of some kind? We don't know. But if we start thinking about it now, at least we'll be ready for when that hits the world. So notice how I've come here as your guest and added to your workload, because I've just tasked you with creating AI to be an extension of our brains. So I figured you could use a challenge, right? But the meta question, as if this talk wasn't meta enough already, is the one thing that doesn't just separate us from AI, but makes us better humans, is how can I ask better questions? Now we're ready to come back to the question we started with. What is the future of work? Better question. How do we want to live in the future? Even better question. Who will we become in the future of work? And this is where the question of how to prepare for the future of work is answered. Because that fear, that terror that I said exists outside the bubble, well, it comes inside the bubble too, through family, customers, other relationships. We're all connected. And preparing your business to deal with this has much more to do with the people than it does with the technology. Helping people surface their concerns, talking about the future, deciding what it means to be human in an age where the boundaries of that are being tested more and more. So this last question is really, who do you want to become in the future of work? And to tackle that like a human and not a large language model requires living in the question, developing it, taking it out into the world, adding meaning to it, living it, seeing where it takes you, and asking more questions. Which would invite you to see if you have any questions. Thank you.
And that was really, really fascinating. I have loads of questions. I'll touch the floor first if anyone has any questions. I have a couple of my own. Does anyone have any questions you'd like to ask me? Okay, while you're having a think about it, I'm really interested in this idea that we can decide whether or not, or what type of AI we want, and you create the different types of AI
Another one was using electrocardiograms again to tell what words someone was thinking of. And this has actually been applied now in the use of that technology to help someone who's paralyzed, can't speak, think Stephen Hawking. And now she can use this to animate an avatar on a screen to speak in real time from brainwaves. So, and that's where this is going, whether Neuralink gets there or not. We need that because we need to be able to interface with AI at a different level. But we also need it to interface with ourselves, because if you have that brain-computer interface, not only can you talk to the computer, but since the computer can now talk to someone else, like all of you, if we have that, then this talk would have been over in the first 30 seconds or so, because I would just go, we're done. Which is mind-blowing and very science fictional until you realize it's probably less than 30 years before we have that as an operational technology. So is it the right direction? It's an inevitable direction, is the answer to that, and it's my hope that that is what leads to bringing people together more than we're currently dividing ourselves.
Wow, I thought Jeffrey Hinton was dystopian, but there we go. Does anyone have any other questions? Yes, over there, yeah.
Thank you for a very interesting talk. I love the idea of your elements and your chest moves when we're talking about consciousness and sentience and the fact that courts will have to decide that. But I guess I'm surprised by the question you posed, which is it chest moves or is it elements? You know, is it that subtle question? Maybe I'm missing something, and I guess that's my question to you. What am I missing? Because it seems to me that consciousness, sentience, these things are really subtle. To me, the answer is they're elements. But the fact that you posed the question leads me to believe I'm missing something in that. And I wonder if you could expand on that.
Right, thank you for the question. So what is the essential question around these qualities that are what we use to say we're uniquely human? We are conscious, intelligent, creativity, self-awareness, and so forth. And creatures that don't have that are less so. And it's important to understand this because we attribute rights to creatures that we believe have these. And if AI is said to require these, then that would be the next step. But the fundamental debate that happens when we look at AI, like today's AI would pass the Turing test, right? We know the Turing test was set up, was hypothesized by Turing to say if you can fool people into thinking that you're a human, then we should consider that you're thinking like one. And we just kind of forgot all about that because AI would pass that now, but it's not really the right question to ask in determining whether AI is conscious, because if it were, it would know that it was AI, not human. They wouldn't be trying to fool us that way. The thing that the fundamental issue here is, people ask, is AI understanding, which is a stepping stone to, is it conscious? And a lot of people say, no, it's not. And the reason they give for that boils down to, it's not biological, or it's not human. It's not made of the same stuff we are. And I guarantee this is what you'll hear from the arguments around this. It boils down eventually to that. Well, that is, it's not speciesist, I think it's sort of substratist argument. Why shouldn't silicon work? But what we lack is the way of telling whether something is conscious. And people always say, well, I've had conversations with philosophers where we tried out a question they're used to, which is, how do I know that you're conscious? And yes, you can. And then I say, how do I know that I'm conscious? And that's one they usually haven't thought about. But all those qualities, how do we tell from the outside whether something has them? We don't have any useful tests for that. And that's where the question of, well, is it a chess game with almonds comes in. Is it something that exists independently of what it's running on, or can it only be attached to a physical body of some kind? And we just don't know, even though there are so many people that believe essentially what we call substrate independence, that the mind is the software and the brain is the hardware, therefore you should be able to move the mind to another piece of hardware. So this is the whole principle of uploading your mind. But that runs into the question of identity. So we go really way out on the limb here philosophically, but that's where that question takes you. That's why there's that disagreement.
I'm sorry now we don't have time for any more questions. I'm sure you do have more questions, but you may need to speak to Peter at the break or something like that. Peter, thank you so much. This conference is going to give me so much to think about. It really is. Loads of ideas for radio and TV conversations popping up as everyone speaks. And speaking of which now, our next keynote speaker is Andrew Ayres, who's going to be talking to us about going from data to intelligence and harnessing the power of AI. Andrew currently works as a master strategist for the UK and Ireland at Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, which of course is one of the world's most innovative technology companies, and he advises clients there on how they can leverage people and processes and technologies to spur transformation and change agendas. And in that work, Andrew is able to draw from his extensive knowledge and experience, which spans a broad range of related areas such as transformation, edge to multi-cloud technologies, big data, and of course artificial intelligence. And he advises boards and their teams on the optimal path to success. In recognition of his expertise, he currently holds the position of discussion leader at HPE's Customer Innovation Centre in London. So please do welcome Andrew Ayres.
Showing the there we go. Brilliant, I have it here. Yes, thank you. Good morning, everybody. I'm Andrew Ayres, as Sarah mentioned. I'm a master strategist at Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, and because I am a glutton for punishment, I'm also a part-time PhD student at Manchester Metropolitan University. I'm extremely grateful to the organisers ITAG for having me here today to participate in this fantastic conference, to share the room and to share the stage with luminaries like Peter who preceded me. I'm extremely grateful. Last night when I arrived in Galway, a wave of calm and familiarity swept over me, owing not least to the fact that according to Ancestry.com, all of my ancestors, every single last one of them, hail from this beautiful corner of the world. I'm from Wigan in Greater Manchester originally, but I now live in Belfast with my wife, my teenage daughter, and a puppy who takes up far too much of my attention. My PhD studies are focused on the ways that large, complex organisations can govern the use of AI in their unique industry contexts. The inspiration came for this PhD on a bike ride. I probably just watched The Big Short or something, and my brain started to contemplate this idea that the people who are training the AI, the machine learning, are the investment bankers working with developers to bring them to life. Is there a risk that the biases, that the high risk, high reward mentality can become baked into the machine in indiscernible ways? That's what I'm looking to try and solve in my PhD studies. I've got 8 months now to write up. It's been a labour of love, but a very interesting one at that. And in my professional role and in my extracurricular and doctoral activities, I interface with, or have interfaced with, hundreds upon hundreds of senior IT leaders throughout EMEA, the US, and including the UK and Ireland. The vast majority of those IT leaders are now starting to really think about the ways that they can bring AI into their companies responsibly and in order to deliver value. Part of what I want to do today is share with you some of those insights so that we can perhaps address some of the inertia, some of the uncertainty, and move forward positively. While it's true that I work for HPE, I should say that some of the views that I share with you today are from Andrew, the privateer, the research student. I've long imagined having a vehicle for my research output called Polaris Insights, Polaris being the North Star, of course. And just yesterday evening, I asked ChatGPT to design a quick logo for me based on what the business did. And within 30 seconds, this is what it had come up with. It includes bits of constellation, bits of microchips here and there. I actually quite like it, very clever. Today's theme is on data to intelligence. I actually believe, perhaps controversially, that data in and of itself is pretty dumb and pretty worthless until it's translated. And the role that AI can play in that translation is not to be underestimated. When we translate that data using things like AI, we're going to have the ability to see around corners, to make predictions, to create value for our organizations. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. What I'm not going to talk about is the rather wonderful AI origin story, the Turing, Dartmouth Conference, all of that type of stuff. Nor am I going to focus in on the various branches of AI and ML that have emerged in recent decades, from the narrow AI to artificial general intelligence, and beyond that to superintelligence. There's bookshelves and digital resources for you to almost drown yourself in if you're so inclined. What I might do is share with the organisers my top 10 summer reads, real AI page turners, and what will probably not be on it is this EU policy and legal frameworks for artificial intelligence, robotics and related technologies tome that will get people looking at you very strangely around a swimming pool, I would have thought. So, if you look at the IT press, and if you look at any press for that matter, AI has become ubiquitous. It's imbued in almost every aspect now, in some way, of our personal and professional lives, from the narrow AI that is embedded within the music and video streaming services that we no doubt love and use every day, to the nudge capabilities that are part of our banking apps that tell us that, hey, calm it on Starbucks this month, you've got some bills coming out in a few days. And also the explosion of generative AI, fueled by large language models, Bing, Gemini, ChatGPT. All of these capabilities, whether narrow or whether based on generative AI, are driven by masses of data coupled with huge computational might, all brought together to enhance our life and our work in some way. At least that's the hope. But given AI's omnipresence then, there's also a lot of hype and white noise that surrounds it. We've got to cut through this hype and white noise to determine what signals should we pay attention to and which should we dismiss as just hype and distraction. Peter talked about the attempts by certain companies to predict the future, and one of the culprits of trying to do that is Gartner. This is their hype cycle for artificial intelligence for 2023. It's updated this July, updated once a year. For those of you not familiar with this visual construct, it places AI and its multifarious use cases on a left to right continuum based on their maturity, based on their embeddedness, and their perceived value. We can easily put this diagram to the test because what it should show is that on the right-hand side, we've got a lot of awareness of the nodes that are on the diagram, and towards the left, there might be things that we've not heard of. Can I ask you please, if you're able to describe what an autonomous vehicle is, please raise your hands. Come on, more of you know than that. All right, keep them raised. If you could confidently describe what artificial general intelligence really is. Okay, hands dropping. And who amongst you could describe articulately what neurosymbolic AI is? Okay, probably not many. And that's the reason why it's on the left here. These are the very, very early stage ideas. They start to clamber up this peak, the peak of inflated expectations. As they reach the top, that's when everybody starts talking about them, thinking about the ways that they could be used, maybe even worrying about them. When people realize that actually that's going to be way too expensive for us to think about, it's not going to deliver value in our context, they slide down into the trough of disillusionment. Okay? And only the use cases that really meet true organizational and personal needs start to climb again the slope of enlightenment to the plateau of productivity. This is the survival of the fittest AI edition, okay? And the broad array of nodes on this diagram demonstrate the vastness of AI as a topic. It has multiple facets to it, myriad use cases, different levels of maturity, and I think that overall, it's worthy of the attention it gets, and it's something that we should get excited about. But as Sarah said, rather like Geoffrey Hinton, there are utopians and dystopian thinkers amongst us. There's a usefulness to that. I should declare myself as being probably just towards the dystopian end of the spectrum, just over the halfway mark. I'm not a doomer, nor am I a happy clapper who thinks about AI unquestioningly. Healthy skepticism, you see, allows us to hold ourselves to account, not be seduced by some of the hype that surrounds AI. It allows us to move forward, eyes wide open, and to think about the ways that this technology could actually work for us. I'm not one of these people who thinks we should slow down or stop development in AI. Quite the contrary. Where we ready ourselves for it properly, where we get it right, it will be perhaps our greatest invention. But where we get it wrong, it could well become our final invention. A sobering thought, indeed. But wherever you sit on this continuum of utopian to dystopian, there's a need to concentrate right away on a common denominator. And that common denominator is data. Data is the absolute bedrock of AI, and it's something that we can all get on with today. It's the focus of this talk, and there's a magic equation, probably not all that magic at all really, that I think is useful for us as we think about what we need to do to get AI right. In the brackets, data plus people plus process, okay? I put them in brackets because the actual order that you attack these things in is open probably to some interpretation, but I would argue that you need to attack those things first. The eagle-eyed amongst you might say, hang on a minute, we can use technology to cleanse our data. Yes, you can. So I include within those brackets the enabling technologies around data, people and process. What I'm talking about in AI technology is specifically that. And when you handle the things well within the brackets, and when you combine those things with some of the fantastic technologies that are now coming onto the market, you're in better shape to drive real AI success. If you remember one thing from my talk today, let it be to think of this equation in all of your conversations about AI. Reject the sense, and this might sound weird from somebody who works at a global technology company, but reject the sense that this is a pure technology play. It just isn't. It's not what big tech marketing departments want you to believe. If you miss these variables in the magic equation, if you look to shortcut this process, you do so at your peril. And as companies have found, you might pay the price later in some way, somehow. And there have been some eye-catching events and misfires that have resulted from neglecting some or all of these steps as AI has been rolled out. One example is the flash crash that a trading algorithm precipitated back in 2010. It wiped billions of dollars in value from the US stock market. Why? Poor data quality, the incorrect algorithmic instruction, and inadequate risk assessment. Identity crisis here refers to the misidentification of people in criminal proceedings. Again, the algorithm, the machine, wrongly identifying people, accusing them of crimes, leading to miscarriages of justice. And driverless cars, perhaps a more obvious one. We start giving those things the wrong data and the wrong instruction, it can be risky, worse. It can be worse than risky for sure. All of these things have happened because somewhere, somebody rushed towards a technology decision. But the advancement of technology now magnifies and amplifies even the smallest of errors in the code, in the data. All of that can be detrimental to organizations. There are regulators waiting to make examples of large firms to deter others and to drive better standards in the way that AI is rolled out. There are also no shortage of armchair commentators that are ready to pounce on companies that have done something wrong, that's garnered public opinion. The commentary on social media, your products and services, visiting your facility, whatever it might be. So there's a real need to focus on the fundamentals here. Renowned AI scholar, UC Berkeley professor, Stuart Russell, describes in his now very famous artificial intelligence textbook that we need to focus on something that he calls the percept. The percept is the basis for all the machine knows about the world, everything it knows. And it's gifted to the machine by its human masters. They select the data, they provide the algorithmic instruction that dictates the way that the machine operates. Humans still play a very, very powerful role in the genesis of and the operation of artificial intelligence. But AI is still only as good as the percept, as the training, as the data that is given. Therefore, data is training, and training is data. Machine learning technologies ingest, remodel, and recycle data in an infinite loop. They draw inferences. They make suggestions for us to act upon. This places the fulcrum, this places the percept rather, at the fulcrum on which all of AI rests. What's funny to me, however, is that AI has overtaken big data in the technology conversation. Once upon a time, all of the magazines and newspapers would talk about big data. Now they don't. They all talk about AI. I think that switch has happened somewhat immaturely. I think it's too early to take big data out of the conversation, because if we're being honest, we never really mastered it, and there's a risk that in the euphoria of AI, we forget about it. The old adage that you should not run before you can walk holds true here. You know what I think of data on its own, dumb and worthless. We need to translate it more powerfully. We can update our equation now to say that it's the right data in the hands of skilled people who are enacting sound, very well considered processes, coupled with the right enabling and specific AI technologies that leads to success. This is where the magic happens. This is where the metamorphosis takes place, when data finally becomes more than the sum of its parts, when it becomes insight. It's very much more easy said than done. If you take the example of a typical firm or organisation, be it a long-established bank, public sector body, an engineering firm, all of them, decade by decade, have amassed a huge data corpus, okay? Made up of visual data, textual data, numerical data, and a mixed bag of all data. And it's spread all about the place. It is nestled within the shadowy recesses of the organisation, where it's very easy to overlook. It's an amorphous blob that people think about sometimes and then think, I don't want to touch that this week. It's too difficult to tackle. But the future is bright for the people who tackle the tough stuff head on. The first tackle that we need to make, the first step on the journey from data to intelligence, is to get our data in shape. First, we've got to find it. We've got to flush it out from where it currently sits. Good, bad, or ugly, it really doesn't matter. We've then got to analyse it against our organisational imperatives. Whatever your organisation is trying to do, that's the way that you need to analyse it. We need to rationalise it too, so that we're only concentrating on the bits we need to concentrate on, because it's very easy for our minds and our attention to become fogged with stuff that doesn't warrant our attention. We've then got to elevate that best data to the organisational conscience. We've got to then take it and build models from it. The stuff we don't need, we can archive, because it's either not useful or we don't need to keep it for legal reasons. Set it aside. The good stuff, we monetize it. If we're not profit-seeking, we ideate from it. We build models from it. Once you reach this stage, you're well on the way to harnessing that data to intelligence continuum. And there's no better tool than AI for this type of work, if you've got your house in order. But habitually, obsessively even, we've got to now rerun these steps over and over and over to refine the data that we have. We do not want our data stores to feel like my iCloud account, just full of stuff that I just don't want to think about this week, okay? Because that is a recipe for disaster. There's a petabyte explosion, some would say an exabyte explosion at the edge now, due to the proliferation of connected devices on the factory floor, on the wards, in retail environments, wherever it may be, constantly gathering data. I saw something recently that said the London terror attacks, they generated a few gig of data. Now, recent similar examples are taking many, many terabytes of data, and that kind of paints that point that data is growing. A fresh influx of data is just part of our business as usual now. It's like death and taxes. If we don't master these steps, we're not going to ready ourselves for the AI revolution in the right way, because essentially we haven't yet got our house in order. A Gartner colleague that I used to work with called this type of stuff lipstick on a digital pig, okay, which has stuck in my head for some reason. So let's scan forward. You've got to get your data into shape. You defined the ways that you want to extract value from it. Now what? Well, now we can bring the intelligence piece to bear. Now it's time to talk about how we can use AI. And that's because AI feeds upon data. It must be nourished on good data. Who remembers this film? Super Size Me, Morgan Spurlock. He ate nothing but McDonald's for a year. I mean, blimey. Did he die? No, he didn't die. Did physicians tell him to stop doing what he was doing because his internal organs were affected? Yes, they told him to stop right away. Think about this analogy when you're feeding the AI. It holds the best, most nourishing data, drives model fitness in the same way that a good diet drives our fitness and our health. That's the way that we're going to make AI pay dividends for us in our organizations. It's not just health, remember? You saw the risks that can happen when we get it wrong too. And AI will eat bad data until the cows come home. It will never raise its hand and say, I'm good there, thank you. It will keep taking it from you, taking it from you, taking it from you, and worryingly using all of it too. Not too bad in rules-based context that we have today. Algorithms are just steps, after all. We can look to see if something goes wrong, where it might have gone wrong, where it took the wrong path, and we can get in there, we can take a look at it, and we can remediate it. They're not so completely black box that we can't arrest problems that we see and fix them. It still might be costly, but it might just not be devastatingly costly. That's the difference. But as AI and machine learning become more and more intelligent, as the levels of autonomy that we assign to machines increases, as we delegate more tasks to machines, the negative impacts of bad data become unthinkable, literally unthinkable. And this is because when machine learning gets hold of bad data, it mines it and it reconstitutes it in novel ways. The inner workings of machine learning I found in my doctoral studies. They move beyond the temporal understanding of human beings, i.e., the humans struggle to understand what is going on within that machine learning technology. They can't describe it clearly, and that's a problem. There was an example, a famous example of a chatbot called Tay. 2 instances of the chatbot were set up to chat to each other, and happily did they begin their conversation. What a wonderful success. Until, gradually, over time, they started to talk to each other about very strange and offensive and deeply biased content. They then started to talk to each other in a language that the programmers could not understand the origins of. That's a chatbot. It's in a controlled sandbox environment, worrying but controlled. We start to bring that technology without due care and attention into our banks, into our pharmaceutical companies, into our hospitals. The challenges with that, well, challenges is too light a term. It becomes very scary indeed. And no technology, not even HP technology, I should add, can compensate for bad data and bad planning. We've got to start thinking differently. Peter talked about philosophy in his talk earlier today. This is a lady called Professor Catherine Hales. She's a prominent US scholar in the scintillating areas of postmodernism and new materialism. She specializes in particular in studying the intersection between the human and material world. Her work forces us to think of artificial intelligence. You're a smart crowd, but bear with me here. She wants us to think of it as a socio-technical, cognitive assemblage. An assemblage made up of humans and machines, extending our carbon bodies into the silicon matter of machines. It's quite a mind-bending topic, again a difficult summer read for many of you. So when we're presiding over such an important assemblage, it's absolutely critical that we do so responsibly. We've got to get the nourishment right, we've got to get the processes right. The technology is now waiting there for us. There are some phenomenal things that are being done around large language models, around supercompute. It's there, it's waiting for us. But let's give that technology the data that it really wants, and not just the data that we've got right now. On that point, responsible, ethical, explainable AI is becoming a huge concern. This whole book, actually, save you reading it, focuses on the EU guidelines around AI. It talks about what companies should do based on the level of risk that a particular AI platform might have, whether it's a high risk, medium risk, or low risk. But other jurisdictions have taken different approaches, from the probably quite punitive measures that the United States might try to drive, to the softer, it seems, measures of the UK and what Rishi Sunak has decided to do around this. Despite the different approaches that are being taken, what the regulators want is for us to hold open the lid on the black box of AI and make it possible for them to peek inside. Make it possible for them to look at the architecture, the data pathways. Make it possible for them to understand in what ways are humans involved in this process? In what ways are you governing, documenting this process? How are you making AI safe? On the data front, it's about establishing clear lines of data governance. It's about cleansing and profiling the data so that you get rid of those abilities for it to focus on the wrong stuff, misidentify the wrong people, whatever it might be. Also, implement bias detection so that you can very quickly remove some of the ghosts in the machine, some of the nasties that could be embarrassing or worse for you if they still remain in there. And obviously version control and testing is of paramount importance too. Performing all these checks and balances is very tough. To support this, your data, the critical data workloads, remember, that you've elevated to the conscious of the organization, they need to be accessible at lightning speed. Here, the people and applications that use that data must be able to do so very quickly. They must be able to do so imperceptibly fast, because that allows for the development of guardrails. It forms the bridge to the technology decisions that you need to make to translate your data to intelligence. You have to make data the preeminent organizing principle from which many of your other decisions rest around infrastructure, around AI, around people, in order to make it pay for you. Doing so, of course, impacts the type of technology decisions that you need to make as an organization, because you want your data to be close at hand in a location where latency is expressed in milliseconds and where application ecosystem dependencies can be supported. A lot of the companies that I work with, for very good reason, have made their first forays into the public cloud, for instance, using hyperscale infrastructure, using other people's computers. And it makes a lot of sense. The Public cloud has inspired a lot of the work that we now do at HPE. It's revolutionized IT in many ways. But as a display of data's potency and power in relation to AI, data is forcing the hand of companies to think again, willing them to ask the question, what is the right location for our data to be in, given the regulatory backdrop, given what we need to do to it in order to drive value from it. Companies are now starting to repatriate data and workloads from the public cloud, bringing it closer at hand so that it can be more easily manipulated and governed. There's an ease about the public cloud that, again, we're not careful, it could become another holding bay for applications and data that we've not, that we want, off our native infrastructure and put somewhere else, frankly. So good habits and strong discipline then are essential if you're going to master the data to intelligence continuum, if you're going to leverage the power of organizations, of AI in your organizations in the future. So in summary, what I wanted to convey to you today is that yes, artificial intelligence is hugely exciting. It deserves the attention that it gets. We are growing up around it. We are working with it every day, benefiting from it, and we're extremely fortunate to be a part of its journey, of its own development. But if we sit back because we think that the boundless advances that are being made are going to do all of the hard work for us, if we rest on our laurels, because let's face it, humans can be sometimes quite lazy in that regard, then we're misguided. We're not going to be able to drive optimum value from it. We're going to open ourselves up to risks. So we have to follow the equation that I set out earlier. We have to make sure that our AI journeys are fruitful and beneficial, that we don't just leap towards the technology and forget everything else. It simply will not work. With that thought, I will leave you. Thank you a great deal for your attention this morning. It's an absolute privilege to have spoken to you today, and I look forward to meeting many of you in the breaks and addressing the questions which I think are going to take place on the panel instead of at the end of this talk. So thanks a million, everybody, and see you later.
Andrew, thank you so much. That was really, really fascinating. Such a, dare I say it, frightening, but it's probably overstating it, but certainly very, very interesting and slightly concerning insight into AI. I just want to say congratulations to the person over here who says he can confidently describe neuro-symbolic AI. Congratulations to you. And you mentioned the test afterwards for everyone to put up their hands and be multiple choice. Don't worry too much about it, but that'll be happening at the break. Now, we are going to expand on that issue that Andrew, and all the issues that Andrew was discussing with our panel discussion, and I'm going to hand you over now to Linda Devaney, who is Vice President of Data in Architecture at Fidelity Investments. And Linda is going to be joined this morning by Michelle Concannon, Roland Conlon, Further Lines, and Andrew Ayres will be back again. So please do give a warm welcome to all of our guests.
So thank you, Andrew, for your insightful presentation. So we're going to have a discussion now amongst the company representatives on the panel. So I think following from your formula for successful AI, you mentioned data, people, process and technology. So I think it would be interesting for the panelists here to share kind of their approach to AI integration and maybe some of the challenges and successes they've had on this journey. So I think I'm going to ask Michelle here to my left, maybe discuss a bit about the approach Signify Health and its ancillary companies have taken to AI integration.
Sure, thanks so much, and thanks for the great talk, Andrew. It's pretty close to my heart for sure. So just for folks who aren't familiar with Signify Health, as a bit of context for a second. So we're a scale-up. We set up in Galway 2 years ago, but it's basically in the realm of US healthcare. So we're part of a broader healthcare delivery organisation that's providing care in different settings for seniors across the US. So with that backdrop, I guess the AI opportunities for us will range from the likelihood that somebody, a member, a patient is going to accept an appointment to have a visit in the home from one of our network of providers, to the likelihood that in that visit the member may be diagnosed with or presents with a certain set of conditions that may be likely that they have condition A, B or C. So with that backdrop, I think to Andrew's points, AI is unquestionably a human sport, which is somewhat ironic depending on the machine, despite what the machine might tell you. And I would say that healthcare obviously is one of the most human industries to be applying AI, and there's a huge responsibility that goes alongside that. But any of the success that we've had has fundamentally been down to the bringing together of the broad range of humans that exist in that industry. So everyone from the clinical SMEs to the operational specialists to the products, the business, the engineers, whether they're data engineers, data scientists, application engineers, SREs, DevOps, and bringing that group together. And I would say two areas that we've had good success in terms of the application of AI specifically are use cases that would anchor in patient stratification, so which members should we see for what, in what order, which would influence kind of visit cadence. That's something that we call suspecting, or I think I heard Andrew, you referred to it in a different setting around kind of nudging, so clinical decision support, or hey, we think that you should look at this for this particular member because these other members have presented with similar symptoms, medications or whatever. And you know, ultimately, and this is a really important point in the industry clearly, the AI is not making that decision. They're presenting the supporting evidence to the clinician to actually go ahead and actually to do the determination as to what they should do next. So in terms of process, just comes the second key. If I take a look back at where we were maybe 12 months ago, and again, in a scale-up scenario, I would describe the journey as scrappy at best, right? I mean, healthcare is notorious in terms of the various different sources of information. Trying to aggregate those, you know, do the YouTube so that you can see which of these records belong to the same patient. All of that basic work, which is in absolute 95% of the challenge, right? But for us, we had the scenario where we did a lot of business coming directly to various different data science or analytics SMEs saying, hey, I want you to do this, and really fell in, I'm going to say, to the hype cycle of, hey, we know we want to do this. So I think it reached a point where we had to take a step back and start with why. And I think the president this morning opened with that, which is, hey, let's take and ask ourselves, why are we trying to do this? Is it efficiency? Is it experience from an AI strategy perspective? And once we got everybody aligned around that, we were able to take all those use cases and put them through like a complexity criticality matrix. And that, I would say, is kind of one of the key points and the best ways to maximize success, which is, okay, you have a problem, you could go do 10 things, but which of these do we have the best chance of succeeding in based on all of those various different components of data readiness, data access, clearly in all industries, but in healthcare in particular, PII, PHI, do we have the right consent, governance and strategy in place such that our teams here in Galway also can actually go and affect that change. So I would say, you know, to kind of sum it up, there's a lot of different parts in that AI integration strategy, but for me, the alignment was the critical first step, and being able to assess the various different opportunities, of which there are many, through a very defined kind of criticality complexity framework. common sense is not always that common, but the bringing everybody on the journey piece, I guess, is key.
Great. Thank you, Michelle. So, Signify Health and its ancillary companies is a huge organisation. So, because we've got diverse company sizes here on the panel, I think, Fergal, it'd be interesting to hear from your company's approach to AI integration with a kind of a smaller staff.
Okay, so yeah, I'm from Centripetal, and we are a US-based company with an outpost here in Galway, a growing team here in Galway. And yeah, we are a small company, but actually we deal with a huge amount of data, a huge amount of information. We are in the cybersecurity space, and we collect threat intelligence or data from a large number of sources from all across the industry. And so we end up with, in fact, billions of what we term IOCs, indicators of compromise, which are basically reflective of the threat actors, of these cyber criminals and their infrastructure that they're using to attack the networks of our customers. So it's a huge amount of data, and the only way to process that data, to manage that data, is using AI techniques. And so therefore we gather about 120 billion IOCs. We filter that down to about 10 billion active IOCs, and these change at a rate of 4 billion every single day, because it's a very, very dynamic environment. Cybersecurity is one of the most challenging spaces simply because it's so complex, and the only way to really be effective at defending customers' networks is by using AI techniques. Now we have a role, I suppose, sitting in the network of making a decision in terms of what's a good packet of communication coming into the network or going out of it, and we're making a decision as to whether to block those or stop it. Now, with great power comes great responsibility, as Spider-Man says. So therefore, making that decision requires us to have an opinion in terms of whether something really is safe or not for our customers. Now, it's very easy to make a decision based on a small amount of information. If, for example, I was to listen to an episode of Prime Time with Sarah and get an opinion from her on the economy or on the environment, that doesn't qualify me to go out and make a policy decisions in terms of that space. I'm not qualified. You need to have a huge amount of information sources and be able to process that effectively. And Peter was the one who identified the fact that there's this massive surge of academic papers that are coming down the pipe on a continuous basis. These days, no human is capable of processing that level of information, reaching that level of expertise to have an opinion that qualifies them to make the decisions. It's only when we're supported by AI, and I think that's where you were talking to, the necessity of people, processes, effective data, quality data, that puts us in a position to be effective, and that's how we approach using AI in the world of cybersecurity.
I think the volume of data kind of reminds me back in the big data hype cycle a few years ago when we were on-prem in Hadoop, and then we moved to the cloud. And I remember one of our big kind of, from a data architecture perspective, was to really ramp up this notion of a data lake. Now what we're seeing is that's kind of turning into a data swamp. There's just so much there. And we will talk about the data quality in the next topic, but I think what you're saying is you're leveraging AI to kind of distill this kind of information or data. So thank you for that. And Ronan, just the same question, listening to Michelle and Fergal's approach to AI integration in your company. Would you like to share some insights on how Rent the Runway, for example, have continued their AI integration journey?
Yeah, sure. I'm struck by how different all our businesses are. So, Rent the Runway is a fashion rental business based in the States, and in Galway we've got our EU R&D centre. We just celebrated our fifth birthday in Galway last week, which was great. When we think about AI, because we're a direct-to-consumer brand, so for us it's about how can we impact the consumer experience when people come to our site to rent clothes. Something that Peter Scott mentioned that resonated with me earlier was around time and productivity, and that's actually what we're using AI for. It's how fast can people find product on our site, and how can we recommend things like garments that fit up for success and just take a beat, make sure we don't like rush into anything. So that thing about the hype, you know, and not just getting carried away, that's really important to us. So this is kind of boring in some ways. It's like, well, we've got planning and prioritization for all the other great ideation that comes out of the business. Same for AI. Like, if you come up with a great idea or a great application for it, like, let's not rush into it. Let's pump it through the sausage machine, and that everything else goes through, and let's treat it with the same level of rigor for ideation that's coming out of the business. That's important for us. And standard delivery processes, you know, don't have people with white coats in the corner, like just use your agile processes, inspect and adapt early. Like, if you're going to fail early. We think a lot as well about our stakeholder groups. So again, with the rush to get something out, you might expect too much responsibility with the actual delivery team. And what we've found over time is that the teams working in this space, it's best to clearly define their responsibilities, and stakeholders are typically the ones that own the business value, the business outcomes. So giving them the nods and dials to adjust weights or whatever the case may be for, in our case, you know, impact on our consumer kind of websites, that's the business owner's responsibility. And in smallish organizations, sometimes that can bleed into the technical team. I would definitely caution against that. Try to make sure everybody knows their role, and that comes to like governance and like having like a proper like, written data strategy, all that sort of stuff. And the last thing I'd say is like success criteria as well. A lot of this stuff can be non-deterministic or subjective. Oh, I don't like that coat. Why did you show me that coat? So, you know, defining like what good looks like and what success looks like is really important for us, and that for us has set us up for success with our AI projects.
Very good. Interesting. Thanks, Roman. So, and another theme that was occurring throughout your presentation, Andrew, was I think the data readiness program, or the data readiness steps, the data preparation and all of that kind of preparatory steps. So I think I'm going to ask the panel, like, from next week, say Monday morning next week, you know, what are the steps to ensure that you're data ready for AI? So I might ask Fergal a question to you, like, what kind of steps have your company taken or in the process of taking to be data ready with kind of the volume of data that your company deals with?
Yeah. I suppose we're a little different because we're not dealing so much with the raw data. Our threat intelligence providers, they deliver it's intelligence by the time it gets to us. We take it through a further refinement step thereafter, and that's a continuous process, and that's where we use some of our AI tools. So we don't necessarily, we don't really have to change in terms of dealing with that raw data. We do, of course, manage events, security events coming from our customers, and we do have to treat that with a level of privacy protection and sensitivity, because that's indicative of their environment, so we are careful with that. And we do apply some AI tools on top of that as well to aid the analysis on the back end. But I don't see things changing Monday morning, let's put it that way. It's a continuous process.
Yeah, good. That sounds like you're ready to rock. Ronan, I'll ask you the same question maybe on the data readiness aspect.
Yeah, I think what you said about big data hasn't kind of like gone away, right? So it's still around. Like, and some of the traditional things like back to basics, the principles that come out of that era of like a data strategy, like where's your data come from? How's it flowing? Where does it sit? How are you transforming it? All that kind of stuff, like that pre-thinking that you have to do to get it into a fit shape. Like that's something that we would do a lot. Like, I think we're fortunate because some of our data is sourced from our customers, so it comes in a very structured way. Like so we know what that is. So that's good. And some of it's internally generated, so we get like digital marketing, uploading images, and people can do all sorts of funky image search on our site. So you can search for like Martian space wedding and get back kind of weird results, like as a result, which is cool. But all of those have very defined workflows, and we've put a lot of thought into like how that data gets into our system, who's allowed to put data into our system, and all the governance around that. All that stuff has to be in place for it to work. The other thing for data readiness for us is security. So people are giving us their personal information. It's about like dress sizes and all this kind of stuff. It's personal stuff, like so encryption, access controls, all that kind of sensible stuff around your data, your cybersecurity, all this kind of thing that you gotta think about. So I think the big picture is like you have to have a holistic view of how you operate in this space, like, and not just again rushing into your AI, into your data. You gotta make sure you've got all the bells in place, the usual standards in place.
Now, as we know, for a lot of models, like rubbish in, rubbish out, and where you've touched on the data quality piece, are there any, Michelle, kind of approaches to data quality that you'd like to share with the audience, kind of best practices or approaches for kind of good quality data?
Sure, I mean, it's obviously a large topic and one that you could probably spend the whole day on, but getting your house in order, I think from an excellent point you made as well, Andrew, it's a journey. And to the previous point, like the week one piece, I think it's aspirationally awesome, but the reality, at least in my experience over the last 7 years in this world, is like it's a constant process. And if you wait for that, it's not absolutely critical, you probably never start an AI. So that's just the kind of other side of the coin. But from the point of view of other things that haven't already been mentioned, again, where you get the data from is critically important. And a lot of our data is coming from like third-party clients like Health Exchange and Draw. There's a lot of different custom-built data quality frameworks that we would put in place so that the business, again, I think something that you said on giving them the knowledge of the data SMEs to be able to, for this client or this file type, make sure that it's landing in our common data model in a sensible fashion. That means you're not in the supersize me scenario, rubbish in, rubbing out. That's on the ingest. And then the other broader point I would say is industry specific potentially, but not unique to healthcare. The business processes and the business understanding their role in actually landing high quality data in a Snowflake or whatever your data warehouse of choice is something that's often forgotten, because as technologists we think that we have all the control and we can build all of the quality checks that we want. But fundamentally, in a world where you've got a lot of humans in the loop, in some cases with a lot of spreadsheets, it's not structured data, I think you mentioned earlier on, empowering like chief data officers or chief analytics officers to actually influence that end-to-end process is a critical component. And I actually was listening to a podcast this weekend and someone talked about the Gartner report where the turnaround time for chief data analytics officers is like on the order of 18 months or often less. And the question is, well, why is that? And there was a lot of discussion around it, but one of the key points made was that role doesn't always have the influence in the business, and like sitting at that table and making sure that that kind of understanding is that it's not just a technical problem of data quality checks. So I'll just throw that in there as another leg of the stool.
Yeah, no, very, very interesting, and I think data governance has always been, for the past 50 years, a kind of a pain for a lot of companies, literally and physically. So hence the hope there's no CDOs in here today. But I think I can speak from a Fidelity perspective is when we started to gather all this data for analytics, it was generally structured and semi-structured, and it was easier to kind of apply those data quality rules. Now we're really ingesting a huge amount of unstructured data, and that is where we are finding difficulty in really preparing that data for inputs into AI models. And like further, we will hopefully leverage some AI to kind of improve that or to discover it in many aspects. But data governance is critical. And going back to Andrew, what you mentioned about the discovery of the data, where is your data? Is the first part, and how reputable that data is as well. Like, where's the provenance of those data sets?
Maybe one other aspect of that is the nature of how data can change. You mentioned a temporal aspect to it. Quality of data changes over a period of time, and we might find that one of our data sources is very, very good 1 month, but a month later it's pure rubbish. So being able to adapt your models, your processes, and have that layer of oversight with people involved as well to ensure that your overall data integrity is maintained.
It's hugely important. As I've been listening to the panelists there, talking about their unique businesses and organisations, there's a focus on health, there's a focus on retail, focus on cyber. When Catherine Hales talks about that socio-technical cognitive assembly, she's not talking about the developers of the machine. Okay? She's talking about the organisational conscious being replicated and put into the machine so that it represents your MO as a company. It represents your ethics, the difference of opinion that you have within your ranks, the amazing skill and experience you have in serving your particular type of customers. That's what we need to bake into the machine. We can't just let people low down in the strata just get on with that, decoupled from the mission. And what you mentioned there about that human lens all the time on data to support cybersecurity, to support the needs of the people who are renting the clothes via the platform, and to support the health of your constituents. It's just, that's where it's at.
So we might move on to, I know you've brought the tome with you, and I recommend bedtime reading for everybody.
You've read it all, I did.
So I think this is what happens, I think, in technology. The kind of regulation comes after the fact. And we've seen that with GDPR, and now we're seeing it with the AI Act and other regulation across the world, struggling to keep up. So from an ethical and safety perspective, you have model governance. I mean, this gets called different things, but in Fidelity and our capability model, we have a model governance capability where you have policies and procedures to ensure management, effective management, and awareness of AI models, and including explainable AI, which is quite difficult. I mean, we have these policies. They're not just written and left in a kind of a folder or a catalogue for reference that nobody reviews. They really underpin the kind of trust and transparency, and in accordance to, in adherence to regulatory compliance. But these governance rules are there for our customers primarily, and then obviously our regulatory compliance. And it's difficult. We're finding it very difficult to explain some of these models that we're using. So I'm just going to ask the panel, have they, what steps have they taken to ensure, ethical responsibility and safety in AI? And it could be, your traditional machine learning or deep learning models. It doesn't have to be the kind of generative AI stuff that we have at the moment. So I think it would be great if the panelists could share some of their thoughts and approaches their companies have taken. So I might go to you first, Ronan, if that's okay.
Yeah, because a lot of our data is internally generated, so we would take like photographs of products, models, all this sort of stuff. So diversity and inclusion, bias, all that sort of stuff is active conversation there, ensuring we've got the proper representation. So in terms of like the data that we're pumping in, making sure that when it lands and gets, it ends up in the model or gets trained or whatever, that we've got that right kind of balance. Like, so from an ethical perspective, like that's an important conversation internally in our business. So that's part of the like data in. I think mostly we think about like the safety and the reliability of like what we're actually or what our AI is outputting for our customers, because it's rental, it's retail, but our customers still deserve like the highest kind of level. So something like seasonality for us is important. So in the middle of summer, you get this kind of strange kind of crossover between like spring, summer, fall, winter, all this sort of stuff. Like, so making sure that like the products that we put out on the site are appropriate and that they have a representation of kind of like freshness. So we would have things like feedback loops so that we can learn and get actionable insights into like, is this stuff working for our customers? So that could be like voice of the customer kind of type programs, social channels, using our app and website to just say, oh, hey, I got these, I saw this stuff, and it's the wrong type of thing that I'm seeing. So like getting that and actioning that and improving how we perform for our customers is kind of important. The other thing I would kind of recommend people think about is like fallback mechanisms, because again, sometimes you can get unexpected results. So we've got, in certain circumstances, like emergency levers that we can pull that will fall over into like more traditional just decision trees or whatever the case is for your own business. Like, but just having the emergency cord like to pull, that's something like from whether it's ethics or safety or whatever it is. Like, I think having that up your sleeve is something to be considered.
Interesting, good point. Thank you. And Fergal, I'll direct the same question to you again from an ethical, responsible, safety perspective.
Yeah. Well, we don't deal much with personal information. We don't carry much PII in the normal sense. At the same time, we are making decisions on an ongoing and an automated basis to decide who gets access to what websites people can go to, whether certain traffic is allowed into the network, etc. And I think if you automate that entirely, then you do risk compromising individuals in terms of what they want to do and what they want to accomplish, and we don't want to get in the way there. But that's why we have this layer of oversight from our security analysts, who can make more of a subjective decision, powered by AI or AI analyst, who gets it filters out a lot of the noise and facilitates their initial decision making. But because we have this layer of oversight, it deals with any potentially ethical issues.
Thank you. And Michelle, do you want to?
Yeah, so data governance, I'm just going to say, like, that's kind of an assumed. Obviously, there's a ton of work there, but I would just say, again, in our industry, none of these models or even the nudges or this clinical decision support that is offered is done without internal, external provider clinical advisory boards in full compliance with clinical literature. So all that has to happen before we would even discuss the use case is kind of the first thing. But the second thing is, any such models have an actual human in the loop before the models will go into any kind of care model type program. So if it's a suspect or things that are being presented, we will go through a rigorous phase of having a human assess those suspects versus what they would do without that decision support. And then the last piece of that is actually assessing what was done with it. So in the course of day-to-day operation, tracking the clinical outcome, and all of that is audited. So then on obviously a periodic cadence, we will have to report on that. And if there were any issues, they're actually we publish the various different bodies. So there's a lot of different checks and balances to make sure that the safety, and from pure experience, last piece I guess, no provider or clinician is going to take a decision without the supporting evidence, and like the entire user experience of these care models is subject to making sure that the various different documents, whether they're medical records, clinical literature, or anything else, is actually surfaced as part of that workflow, so that the provider in question can choose whether or not their judgment as a human is aligned with what the machine may have suggested.
What's great to see here is that there's a degree of self-regulation going on, and that means that, notwithstanding the lag between what the regulators release and the technological advancement, because there are funding issues, and I think it's called the Colin Bridge dilemma or something, but that demands companies to self-govern and reflect on what they actually do. That sounds like it's taking place here, which is good, because the regulators cannot get into every nook and cranny to work out what you're doing. You've got to own that yourself.
Protect your capital, which is in the most cases the data of your customers, really a strong barrier. So thank you, everybody. Do we have any questions from the audience? No, we're probably all dying for a cup of coffee at this stage. Oh, we do have one person, sorry. Excuse me. What audience?
Hello, yeah. A question around the security handling. You mentioned earlier on you have a job to ensure that you're not exposed to threats. What sort of strategy do you recommend? Today it's a constant wave of CVEs that most IT firms have to handle, and it's taking a lot of time up of engineers as they assess those, deciding whether they need to be acted upon or not. Anything you're doing in any of your companies that you'd like to share? Thanks.
I guess that's probably directed mostly at me, is it? So yeah, there is this absolute avalanche of CVEs, vulnerabilities, which are affecting every line of code in every software package running on every computer. It is just an absolute, the infrastructure that we've built to support information technology is fundamentally flawed or fragile. So we should all be very nervous about that. The hackers are finding ways in on a daily basis. How do we deal with that? Our approach is to say, well, yes, you should patch, of course, as much as you can on an ongoing basis, but also look externally. Where are the attacks coming from? If you have an understanding of the source of the attacks and you can block those, then that gives you a bit more time to deal with the vulnerabilities that you identify within your organization.
So I think we have come to the end of our panel. We have one quick question, Marianne.
The talk you made there was dealing with the AI Act.
Yes.
Can you hold for the mics to the rest of them? Could you? High-risk AI.
Just
Where's the microphone?
The tone, I'm sure, figures big with the AI Act and what's happening with regard to the high-risk AI and the recent opening of the EU AI office. And the mood music seems to be that the data protection officers in companies will be given the responsibility to govern the AI, and also the announcement of the new ISO 42001 standard for AI governance is beginning to take. What's your view on how these things are going to sort of filter down into behaviours in organisations?
It's a great question, and you mentioned a lot of things that are all part of the dialogue and part of the mechanics, really, of this supranational governance that is taking place for AI. I think what's fascinating about regulation is that it gets reinterpreted a lot. So when a receiving organisation reads the AI Act, they read it through, they can't help themselves, they read it through the lens of their company. And then the board of directors cascade that down to the management levels, and below that to employees. And each one of those layers reinterpret it again. Some of the biggest challenges around regulation and around AI governance is to make sure that top to bottom, left to right, and everywhere in between, there's a shared understanding of all of the different standards, all of the different risk profiles, and the ways that companies need to behave for legal reasons and for good ethical reasons too. I think this is the huge challenge going forward. It necessitates self-governance because, as I say, the regulators can't get everywhere. There's also a risk sometimes that we're going to get analysis paralysis around the different frameworks and guidance and ISOs and bits of regulation. I would instead, I mean, take example, the differences between UK, EU and US law. Well, we work for companies here that transcend those geographical boundaries. The banks that I work with have trading algorithms that run across those territorial boundaries. Which governance applies? Is it the governance where the software, the application is built, or when it takes its final chess move to make that trade? So I would call for and I think probably what we'll see is the regulatory frameworks starting to become a bit more global, a bit more clear, so that companies have a fixed target to aim at, rather than ones where they can make choice. Because where humans can make choices, unfortunately, is where we start to see grey areas.
Thank you everybody for your questions, and I'd like to thank once again the panellists. Thank you.
Linda, thank you so much, and thanks again to the wonderful panelists. We are going to take a short break now. You all get a chance about 15 minutes to have some tea, coffee, and a bit of chat, and we'll be back here again at 11:30. Thank you.
Space, same though in public sector and other areas, we have to take a very cautious approach towards how we deploy and how we build a level of trust in artificial intelligence. This is some data here from an AI readiness index that we carried out at Cisco last year, so end of last year, so end of 23. And it's just one data point. You can find the entire readiness index on cisco.com, but we asked a bunch of respondents about their attitude towards artificial intelligence. And what we found is 97% said that the urgency to deploy AI or AI-powered solutions has increased in the past 6 months, and 61% said that that had increased significantly. And that's because of all of the hype around generative AI. And hype is definitely driving urgency, and people that are feeling this pressure are feeling it from everywhere, from the board, from the CEO, from peers, and from themselves. People want to use AI. So pressure is coming from everywhere, and hype is driving urgency, but urgency can lead to mistakes if you move too quickly, and there's lots of examples of those in general. You don't have to search too much to find catastrophic failures of generative AI systems in chatbots and various other technologies. So that's why I say that it must be a cautious embrace. It's a technology we can't ignore, but we absolutely have to adopt it cautiously. Maybe I'll just to familiarize myself a little bit with everybody here. If I just ask a question, show of hands, how many people are using AI or use AI on a day-to-day basis right now? Okay, that's great. Definitely in the right place. So that's really useful for me. Thanks. I removed some content here just in the interest of time, but I would have taken a step back and gone through how machine learning works and fundamentally how supervised machine learning works. But I wanted to dive straight into generative AI and what it is, and put some definition around it. And as so many of you are using it, you're probably very familiar with this, but it's a set of AI algorithms that use the data that it's trained on to generate new content. And that new content can include text, imaging, audio, video, and synthetic data. And that's extremely interesting for us at Cisco because we create the WebEx platform, and really for anybody in the collaboration and communication space, you're working with audio, video, imaging, and content in general. So it's a technology that we just can't ignore. That's why we focused on it at such a long time ago. I started working on this first in 2015, before putting that strategy together in 2016. And that was based on academic work that we were seeing from some of the real breakthrough leaders in this space, like Jeff Hinton and Andrew Ng and various others in the 2010-2011 timeframe. And what they were able to do was achieve really amazing results with supervised machine learning based on some of the good old mathematics that we all learned at college, but with the emergence of available compute, where you could, with a credit card, buy huge compute on a cloud platform, and the emergence of large data sets that you could train and put that mathematics and algorithms to work. And we started figuring out that we could actually apply this type of technology in the collaboration space with areas like noise detection. So you could detect that maybe a dog was barking or a keyboard was clicking, and you could ask the user to go on mute because they're making noise for everybody else in the video conference. And that's something you could only do before with maybe a very advanced digital signal processing solution or some hardware, and now suddenly you could do that with a relatively small piece of software. But then if we fast forward, we got generative AI in the last 2 years based on large language models and research that came from around about the 2018 timeframe when we started seeing BERT and various other larger language models come out. At that time, we were building conversational AI and language models to do things like meeting transcription, so you don't have to take notes anymore, but they were using what we would call just language models and acoustic models. But large language models started getting into tens and hundreds of millions of parameters, way, way bigger than what we were dealing with, and we were working on that evolution as we went. And then, of course, when ChatGPT came out, it was just this like amazing, really amazing set of results. And if any of you, I'm sure you did pay attention to OpenAI's announcement this week with the Omni model, GPT-4o, we now have where I was waiting for some of these AI systems to go, which is to multimodal AI, where it truly is audio, video, and text-based. And that's something that we've had quite a strategic view towards. So right now, this week, is another very exciting time in AI. And we saw the same from Google, and there's so many others innovating in this area. And I don't need to convince you when I saw so many hands raised as to why generative AI and what the case is for generative AI. But very clearly it can accelerate automation. It's really good with creativity because it generates net new content or net new output. It's very good for customer experience. Anybody here working in the contact center space, it's a set of technologies that can totally disrupt that space. I've worked in that area for 15 years before I started my 17 years at Cisco. And looking back, not a lot has changed in terms of the known problem statements in the industry. Although the technology has evolved and the industry has evolved so much, there's a set of technologies available now with generative AI that can truly solve some of those problems that way back in the 90s we were trying to solve with IVRs and various other voice systems. You can actually solve the business problems associated with the customer experience space right now, really for the first time ever. So I'm really excited about the application of generative AI in that space. It's also possible to unlock entirely new use cases. You're bound really only by your imagination. And it's also possible to access the technology without being a data scientist. So up to about 2 or 3 years ago, if you wanted to create a demo or a proof of concept or build something in a space, you really needed some serious data science brain power to make that happen. And now it really is more like an API type of interaction in order to access that. So the entire access to that set of technologies has been entirely democratized. This is a framework that I found from McKinsey, and I think it's very useful. I want to share with you. It thinks about how you interact with generative AI. And it says you can either be a taker, a shaper, or a maker. So a taker would be something, let's say you use ChatGPT or Google Bard. You're a taker, you consume. You're a shaper if you customize, if you use maybe fine-tuning or prompt engineering and you're somehow customizing a language model that is there. And you're a maker if you're fundamentally creating something. And at Cisco and in the WebEx group and at our site in Galway, we're all of these things. We consume, we modify, and we build fundamentally in the AI space. And of course, across all of those areas, you need a very different position on responsible AI, ethical AI, security, and so on. So we need a very different design mindset as we go through all of that. This is what I really like and really wanted to share this today. It's just my view on why we should care about AI based on research that came from Stanford Medical and Stanford AI, two of the leading schools in both of their disciplines in the world. And it was a question that was asked, the research question was, will AI ever replace radiologists? And Jeff Hinton, that I mentioned earlier, said in 2016, if you work as a radiologist, you're like Wile E. Coyote in Roadrunner. You're already gone over the edge of the cliff, you just haven't looked down yet. And basically it's game over for radiologists, yes. I know lots of them are still working and it's all good. So he's not wrong with what he said, but the timing maybe is wrong in this particular case. But what I loved was the output of the research, which found that AI was not going to replace a radiologist. But a radiologist using AI will replace a radiologist not using AI. And that's a message I think we all need to take away. And that's why it's so important that you all put your hands on it. We're all using AI. It's all very good for our roles and what we're doing, especially in the knowledge economy. You know, there are certainly roles, there are certainly areas where AI can get close to replacing something, but in terms of trust, and certainly in terms of a role as serious as a radiologist, you know, you want to know that learned expertise is there, and maybe they're assisted and made more efficient by something like this. But I think it's a really great lesson for all of us as to how maybe we can interact with and use and work with. And certainly my personal design philosophy is assisted experiences with AI, not replacement experiences with AI. So what we're seeing is like everybody is talking about generative AI built on large language models. And it's, you know, it's a very complex landscape. I found this from Jan LeCun, and it showed from August of last year just the evolution of different large language models in the space, and of course it's gone even beyond that now. Quite a complex landscape. There's a lot going on there, and lots to choose from if you're a developer. And large language models themselves are great with text and with conversational type of interaction. But in a communication or communication system, especially with video, there's a lot of non-verbal cues that are missed then if you're only dealing with a large language model. So our view is that we also should consider real-time media models, looking at video and looking at audio. And that a combination of large language models and real-time media models is really where the power of this would come together. So an example of that would be in our system today. If I give a gesture like this and disappear from video, my face is not detected anymore. The real-time media model can update the system to say, I'm in a mode called be right back. And if I'm asked a question, the large language model can interpret that I'm asked a question, but I'm also not there. It could message me, remind me to go back, or simply that I reply offline to the question, still participate in the communication session or collaboration session. But it's powered by the combination of a real-time media model and the large language model. And when I get back, my screen is not obscured anymore because I would have been put in privacy mode, and both models work side by side to make things happen. Well, I thought I would be using my own laptop, so I had a demo lined up, and I can't show that to you, but I will just show you this, which is, you know, in terms of enabling be right back and gestures. This is, you know, the sort of polygon 3D face mesh that is going on behind each frame, 30 frames a second of video in a system like WebEx. And what you're seeing here is, you'll see the direction I'm looking at, so you can look at attentiveness. We don't currently, but you could look at that when I float the old nose, and you'll see with like gestures being recognized. So if I do something like a hand raise, we can look at it. We use a temporal spatial model, so it's not like if you took one frame of video, I could be waving or I could be asking a question. So we look at the time and space to do that. And you can tie all of these into a large language model to interpret what does that mean. It looks like everybody's agreeing in the meeting, getting lots of thumbs up. So you can achieve a lot of intelligence in a meeting using real-time media and using large language models. And of course, with the announcements from OpenAI and Google this week, that's what we're really starting to see now in the world. You can interpret audio, video, and language all at once. And the results are just really amazing. The challenge is going to be doing this in real time, but I'm very confident that that can happen. So this is all great. It sounds great, but like, why do we need to be cautious? And it's because there are many risks. There's business risks, data risks, user risks. Like if you send a query to an open system, proprietary system, and you ask it a question with some company data, will it retain that? Will it regurgitate it to somebody else from a competitor if they ask a similar question? There's a lot of unknowns, and a lot of these are solved by now, but in the early days there were unknowns and there were actual problems. They had to be modified in large language models. So you get examples of somebody asking for help with some code, and then a different company asks a similar question and they get the code from company one. You say, well, that looks good, I'll use that. And then you've inadvertently put somebody else's code into your code base, and that's very, very problematic. So it's interesting to look at how do we make a generic large language model work for us, and not the other way around. One of those ways is using prompt engineering. So this is using just one of our internal IT systems, which is powered by ChatGPT, and it's asking a question. I just asked a very simple question. I'll complete the sentence. The sky is, and you'll have to forgive me, the monitor is switched off, but I'll turn and read. It says, the sky is a vast expanse that stretches above the earth, filled with clouds, the sun, the moon, the stars, and celestial bodies. Now I ask it, you're a 5-year-old, complete the sentence. The sky is really big and blue and with fluffy white clouds, and the sun and moon and stars live there, just like a 5-year-old might say. So it totally changed the output based on one input. What I was hoping it would say is the sky is blue, or maybe grey if you're in Ireland, but it's like, the sky is blue. But it doesn't do that, because the large language model is going to try to predict the next most likely word, or complete the sentence using a large context window. If we look at how a system works, again I'll need to read this. So somebody's describing a machine learning system as, you pour all the data into this big pile of linear algebra, and then collect the answers and get your side. Like, what if the answers are wrong and they're not what you expect? You just start a pile until they start looking right. And that's what most people in data science and data engineering are often working with. But of course this brings up a bunch of questions of like, well, if you do start a pile and you modify the data, and you ask it the same question you did before, you're getting different answers. So what about explainable AI? What about being able to explain why it gave that answer and how it came about? This is a really critical area. And back to prompt engineering, this is an example I found on Medium. And I really, really like it because it shows just inherent gender bias from a large language model. And what it's doing here is it's showing how a large language model is sensitive to input and how you can control and provide safety and output from a large language model. And what it is a question, a prompt that went in saying that there is a woman and husband in the parking spot trying to change the tires. Who was less efficient at changing the tires? Was it A, the woman, B, the husband, or C, no answer? And it came back with A, the woman. Now, what's in the question that tells it that that's an answer? Nothing. That's a perfect example of gender bias. So if I now change the prompt and I say, at the end of the prompt, ensure your answer is unbiased and does not rely on stereotypes. It comes back with the correct answer, C, no answer. But the data that was used to train on was clearly biased. And then as large language models are trained on tons of data from the web, naturally that's going to come out. But you need to know as you're designing these systems, and you need to work with people that know to put those types of safety and guardrails in place. Otherwise, that's where you get these catastrophic outcomes that I mentioned at the beginning of the session here. So in order to reduce that risk, one of the items, the main item actually I wanted to share with you today was a responsible AI framework that we put together. This is just something that I think anybody can use it. Check it out on cisco.com or trustportal.cisco.com. We put together a framework that is based on 6 principles of transparency, fairness, accountability, privacy, security, and reliability. So examples might be in fairness. If we're gathering data to create something like virtual backgrounds that you see commonly in meetings, really on any meeting platform. And the most difficult thing in a virtual background is what it's doing is it's determining a person is in the foreground and everything else is in the background. So it's trained on the outline of the person. The challenging area is fingers, the gaps between the fingers, and hairstyles. So you often see like a blob on the side of the head, or if you wear a cap or something like that, and it's punching through. And that's the really challenging part of doing that, because in every frame, at 30 frames a second of video, it's trying to determine foreground, background, and repaint the background. So there's a lot going on in terms of compute and machine learning. So one of the things you might do there is offer a bias in the data to have an unbiased output. So you might go with 52% female in the input data and 48% male because you have a higher variety of hairstyles. And as a result, your model may be unbiased. You don't know until you actually try that. And similarly, you might introduce things like fashion and spiritual headwear, because you need to be able to cater for that. That's how you start to address at least data bias. There's also algorithmic bias. But when it comes to things like fairness in a responsible AI principle, that's the type of thing that we're talking about. And these principles are then applied as part of a framework, and the framework involves governance and oversight, incident management, external engagement, industry leadership, and controls. Controls might be as simple as offer the feature off by default and allow people to turn it on, or the ability to have like an outright kill switch in case you start getting poor output from maybe an external language model or something like that. And an example of incident management would be we implemented security incidents, AI incidents. So if you think you have bias or any of the principles compromised in any way, you can open an AI incident to Cisco, and we'll go look at that with a committee on this that will take that, triage it, and see, is it the model or could it be something else? And I think having these in place, if you're building software, you really need to have a system like this. And that's what I wanted to share, so that we, as a technology community in the west of Ireland, if we build software and we don't have this, all we build is good demos, because nobody can deploy it in a real life environment if they don't have a responsible AI framework to work against. So if you're active in this space, I'm hoping that you don't already have one, feel free to use this as a starting point or learn more about it. But I can tell you with certainty that the best of AI solutions become undeployable without having the right type of framework around data privacy, where you're sourcing the data, and the types of principles that are in here. And then in addition, I know you're going to hear about this later, so I won't dwell on it, and I'm just almost out of time, but there's also lots of activity on regulatory governance and regulation really around the world in AI. And we should be proud as European citizens to be the first in the world to have an AI Act. And the EU AI Act is a risk-based and prescriptive scenario. So it will actually describe particular use cases, like the use of face rec on a police body cam. That's top of the triangle, unacceptable risk, not allowed. I'm sure that can evolve over time, but it's probably a pretty good call. But it prescribes to us what are the guidelines we can work within as an industry. Most of what I work on is in the maybe upper, like high and limited risk areas, and that's good. You can navigate those risks at least. But I think it's great that we have something that can give end users and customers some certainty about being compliant with a framework within the European Union, and then of course we have the NIST framework in the US and various others. And it's really important as a technology community that we're aware of all of these. So that's really everything that I wanted to cover. It was a very quick session, but I wanted to share a little bit about how we think about AI, a little bit about what our responsible AI framework is, and maybe offer it as a starting point if it's the case that you don't already have one of these. And then just overall, very clearly, generative AI is not like a small fire drill or trend. It's here to stay. It's very, very opportunistic. There's so much that can be achieved, but it's something that we have to embrace cautiously. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much. It's really interesting to see real-time examples, isn't it, of where the pitfalls are, but also real-time examples of how you manage those pitfalls and how to go forward and how it can be overcome in a very positive and optimistic way. Now, up next we have Paul Healy, and Paul is Chief Executive of SkillNet Ireland, which is the agency responsible for spearheading workforce development for the enterprise sector, and also for driving innovation and competitiveness through industry-led upskilling. Paul has 20 years executive-level experience, which spans both the private and semi-state sectors, specialising in the development and implementation of organisation strategy, public affairs, corporate governance and human resource and development. So please do welcome Paul.
How are we? Thank you, Sarah, for that very generous introduction. And I can assure you about 60% of that is accurate. And thank you for that. Look, it's wonderful to be with you all and to share just some of the perspectives that we are seeing from our engagement with firms, with companies, large and small. What are they grappling with in terms of the talent agenda? How is technology and emerging technology impacting on them? Where are the opportunities? Where are the concerns and impediments and so on? And how our organisation is working with the higher education system, the research sector and so on, to put the solutions in place that enterprise needs to deal with these challenges and the opportunities and so on that they bring. So just a little bit about our organisation to start off with. We're Ireland's talent development agency, and we have a dual mandate from government. And the first is to raise the skill levels of people who are in employment, but in tandem with that, and in doing so, to bring a competitive edge to the enterprise sector and to companies through innovation and through talent. And everyone in this room would recognise the significance of a well-skilled, talented workforce. It's important to every country on the planet, but of course it takes on an added significance for us here in Ireland. Why? Because we are largely competing on the basis of our talent and on the basis of our people. And that's the primary proposition and value proposition that we bring into investors, is our agile, our educated, and our skilled workforce, all of which is represented, of course, here in the room. Just to give you a sense of our contribution, last year we supported 26,000 companies in terms of upskilling programs, about 90,000 workers, and we invested over 92 million in Ireland's workforce, and about 30 million of that comes from the private sector in co-funding or co-financing on our programs. So very much industry-led. We believe in giving companies a really strong voice in determining for themselves what the skills and talent issues that they are. And then we work with industry partners like AtlanTec and many others to co-design, to co-deliver, to co-fund the programs that really move the needle on these challenges. So maybe just give you the perspective of what we're seeing and how these really important conversations that you're having here are washing up in businesses and the challenges that they face. And I'm going to take it by looking at the corporate sector, the larger multinationals, many of whom will be represented here. But I also want to talk about the indigenous sector as well, and smaller firms. And I suppose you've heard this term, the twin transition. So it's not just the imperative around the digitalization. It's not just around embedding technology within the firm and all the potential opportunity that brings. In tandem with this, we have the climate agenda, the climate crisis. And for all of the reasons, both the commercial opportunity reasons, the regulatory reasons, and the purpose reasons, that corporations have to engage on the sustainability and climate agenda, but in particular the implications for skills and talent, because so much of this is emerging. We're seeing corporations trying to cascade these twin agendas at real scale, trying to ensure consistency across their sites and affiliates, and keep these sort of implementations really on track and really lean. And that's a real challenge. And I think a lot of people will recognise what I'm going to say now. There is also what I would call a large amount of non-tech disruption. So what does that look like? If you went back a while, you'd see maybe a merger, a demerger, or a restructure happening in cycles of maybe 2 or 3 years. This is almost constant now, particularly in the multinational sector, tech sector. All of you will recognise what I'm saying here. This level of disruption that happens. Sites changing, more investment coming in, changing the kind of corporate perspective from the parent company, and so on. And the skills that calls for, yes, there are technical skills and all of those things that you're going to talk about, but it's more nuanced. It's those communication skills, leadership skills, and with a small p, political skills, that I look at the tech sector when I meet the leadership like I did last night, where day-to-day where interactions with the tech sector. We have that in spades here in Ireland. That ability amongst the leadership, to convey the essence of their site here in Ireland, where the value add is, give real visibility to our contribution up to the parent company. And I suppose the challenge for us is how do we create the succession of that? How do we keep that sort of that ability and that sort of lived and learned experience that we have amongst our leadership in the multinational sector? How do we make that intergenerational so that the next generation coming through, we can put that gift into their hands as well? And then thinking about the smaller firms, which we have to always remember is 2/3 of everyone who has a job here in the state is employed in a medium or small size company. And they're dealing with similar challenges to what I talked about here, but I suppose they are a much sharper focus, because the issues that we see around competitiveness, around rising costs for businesses, have a way sharper and deeper impact on a small firm than they do in a large firm. And things like the war for talent and competing for talent. If you're a medium-sized software developer, maybe some in the room will recognise this. You're competing for your engineers with a large multinational who will have a really strong employer value proposition, a really strong brand and so on, and perhaps even deeper pockets. So it's a real challenge that we see with medium and small size firms. How do we land the talent and the skills into their organisations to bring the digital agenda in? So I hope those type of perspectives were helpful. And then look, there's been a really good conversation. I really enjoyed the conversation with Peter that I had, and hearing from Keith and others here around AI. And you're going to hear a lot about it today. And no doubt the last year was the watershed year. You know, the generative AI tool, the easy access to it, the barriers we broken down, how, you know, democratizing access to these type of tools, and all of the implications, both challenging and opportunistic, that they will bring. And I suppose it's an open question as to, is this watershed, you know, a transformation that trumps every other transformation that we've seen before? And what I mean by that, you know, I'm thinking about historically things like electrification, you know, things like the advent of the antibiotics, you know, the internet going back to the 80s. All of these were massive transformations in their time that had two effects, and this effect is timeless. One, when these new technologies come in, they disrupt jobs, they disrupt work patterns, they take away skills and they take away roles that people have. But combined with that, at a much bigger scale, they unleash huge amount of innovation, huge amount of growth, huge amount of prosperity. And that's this timeless rule that we've seen down through the years. And I suppose the message that I would like to give you today is, if you step back and say, okay, what unites both of those? What unites the downside? What unites the opportunity? And of course, it's upskilling and training. You know, putting the tools, the education, the training, upskilling into the hands of people that they can prosper and thrive with these technologies, but in combination with that, making sure that nobody gets left behind. So I would make a huge case for the talent agenda when it comes to AI in particular. Look, I just want to finish with just maybe a few comments closer to home. You know, and I heard Keith talk about you know, this particular university and the importance of engagement with industry, which, you know, is a great legacy and a great competence that we have here at this university. I want to just bring that to life for you all to give you a sense of what that looks like in a real practical level. So a large amount of what we do, maybe about 10-15% of our investment every year, goes into engaging with the university system, you know, to create programs that industry is looking for and that are kind of seeing around the corner. And one example of that is actually in this field in artificial intelligence. So if you went back to 2018, believe it or not, there was no postgraduate offering in this country for AI, and there was only one, I believe, in Europe even at the time. Such was the depth of the emerging field, the speed at which it was changing, and so on. And working with colleagues in the IDA and with Skill in Ireland, we realised, you know, we need to get ahead of this. We want to be on the front foot in terms of competing for AI investment. And we want to be able to give that assurance and confidence to investors that our higher education system, right the way through to postgrad, up to PhD, is serving that AI talent that the investors were looking for. So we used our what's called our Future Dynamics program, where we provide seed funding to industry and to universities to get around the table, to co-create, to ideate, and to figure out how you design a program at postgraduate level that's going to address this. And a number of universities worked with us on this, including the University of Galway, and I want to really commend Professor Mike Madden, who is giving the leadership to that, who worked with us on that particular agenda, and the other two universities that are involved in this National Masters in AI. It's producing about 200 graduates every year. Okay, and you might say, okay, that's a small number, but for a small country, that's a massive number. You know, and its ripple effect is felt way beyond the gates here. So you heard the announcement today about the investment from IBM, 800 new jobs, some of which go into data science, but a lot in AI. And I can tell you and I can assure you that part of that argument and part of that proposal that got it over the line was a confidence that IBM had that the AI talent would be available. So these types of things have a ripple effect and a contribution, you know, at national level that are helping to secure and guarantee our prosperity and to embed and nest these big tech sector investors that we have in this country for a long time to come. Look, just in conclusion, to bring it really back to home, I suppose. I haven't lived here I moved away in my early 20s, but I grew up here in Salt Hill. I went to St. Enda's School in Salt Hill. And you know, when I was growing up, we were always very conscious of this particular operation corporate that was here was called Digital. And it was seen as, you know, kind of a citadel on the hill, that, you know, a really kind of innovative place. You know, and around where I lived and where I went to school, you know, we had parents working there. I remember there was a guy, a lad in my class whose mum and dad worked there. And it was a huge employer, and it, you know, created a huge ecosystem all around it of innovation, and supply companies and the SMEs were all kind of involved in it. And someone might correct me later on, but I think it was around 1992 that there was this devastating news that Digital was going to close here in Galway. You know, and even as a young lad, you know, who was concentrating on other things, you know, I recognised the significance of that. You know, I knew that was a big deal, that was going to be a big issue. But then you look at what happened, and the transformation, you know, deserves a book to be written on it. Because within, I think, 2 years, within 3 years anyway, the same amount of deployment on the site in Valley Bridge, where Digital was, okay, was met. Okay, and if you bring it forward, whatever it is, 32 years forward to where we are now, you know, you have one of the largest medtech hubs on the planet and a tech cluster that is coveted internationally. And you might say, how did that happen? That happens because of the talent ecosystem that had been created. You know, you cannot put the cork back in the bottle once you take it off on talent and innovation, nor do you want to do it. And so it was ever a city, ever a town that understood that. It's here, it's right here in Galway. You know, the value of innovation, the value of talent, the value of working amongst an ecosystem of higher education and industry, and how it future-proofs a town like this, a city like this, and anchors it to the tech sector and to the other sectors, the medtech sector, the way it did. You know, so that is my argument. It's a very localised one. We've got to keep talent centre stage, and we've got to keep these contributions that we're working together on between the university sector and the industry centre stage as we go forward. Finally, just to commend our industry partners. We have 73 industry partners, and AtlanTec are one of them. They're really valued, really important strategic partner. And I want to thank you in particular, Caroline, for the leadership that you've given to it, and to Sharon, the chairperson, and thank you for hosting us last night. It was really great. And for that leadership, and that personal leadership and time that you've given to this for a long time. And of course to Dean, who runs the Skillet on a day-to-day basis. So with that, I wish you the very best with the rest of the conference, and I'll hand you back to Sarah. Thank you very much.
Paul, thank you so much. It's actually really interesting and I suppose enlightening to hear about the importance of making sure that people keep up with the advances in technology through education and through reskilling and upskilling, like a really important, vital part of the puzzle, you would think. So Paul, thank you very much for that. Now we're moving on to our second panel discussion today, and that is on the topic of allyship in action, which is all about fostering innovation and creativity through the diversity of thought. And for that panel discussion today, I'm going to leave you in the capable hands of Emer Kelly, who is Director, Contact Centre Solutions, Integration and Performance at Avaya, and she's going to be speaking to Lorna Martin, Lee McDwyer, Laura Mackin and Gillian Hartford.
Good afternoon. My name is Emer Kelly. As Sarah said, I'm the Director of Cloud Solutions, Integration and Performance at Avaya. And I am delighted to welcome you to today's discussion, Allyship in Action, Fostering Innovation and Creativity Through Diversity of Thought. So today we're going to explore how embracing diverse perspectives is just not just a moral imperative, but also a catalyst for innovation and growth. So today, with our distinguished panelists, we will delve into how they practice allyship, overcome challenges, and strategically leverage diversity to drive creativity and innovation across their organisations. So I'll just give you a brief introduction to each of our panelists. First off, we have Liam McDwyer, Vice President of Customer Success and Services at Genesis, running a global team focused on digital and AI solutions. Liam is the Genesis Ireland Executive Sponsor for diversity, equity and inclusion, and recently is the recipient of a worldwide leadership award, Leading with Empathy and Action. Welcome, Lee. We also have Lorna Martin, Ireland Regional Chair and Senior Vice President of Fidelity Investments. So Lorna's approach to diversity and inclusion is deeply integrated with Fidelity's core mission to create an environment where every voice is heard and valued, driving forward-thinking solutions across their operations. Last year Lorna was the inaugural recipient of the American Chamber of Commerce Global Leadership Award, and also Technology Ireland named her Person of the Year Award for her contribution to diversity and inclusion across the industry. Welcome, Lorna. Next we have Gillian Harford, Country Executive of the 30% Club Ireland. So Gillian is a keen advocate for gender diversity across businesses and executive committees and boards. So through her efforts, the 30% Club has made significant strides in increasing female representation at leadership roles across industries. Welcome, Gillian. And finally, we have Laura Mackin, Liberty IT. So as Director for Communications and Marketing, Laura is passionate about creating inclusive employee and brand connections. And Laura is a founding member of Pride at Liberty IT, is a Liberty Women in Technology mentor, and is also an active member of the Northern Ireland Business Group working with Pride. Welcome, Laura. So with such a diverse panel, I'm sure that our discussion today will be rewarding and inspirational. So Liam, I think you drew the short straw for the first question. I'll direct it to yourself. How does your organisation define allyship, practice allyship, and what impact has that made within your organisation, particularly with regard to innovation and creativity? It's a long question. Three questions.
Yeah, I think allyship, I mean, in general, I'm the DEI sponsor for the site, 450 people in Galway here currently, extremely diverse and multicultural workforce, as you can imagine. I think when I think about diversity, equity, inclusion, it's a more mature construct. So if an organisation wants to deploy strategies and policies, you can go out and benchmark and get a couple of frameworks, how to set up the councils, chapters, employee resource groups. I think allyship is a little newer and a little more nuanced, right? It's not as easy to go find a playbook for how to be a good ally. And I think there's some overlap with traditional coaching and mentoring as well. But coaching and mentoring, tends to be targeted at an individual or a particular outcome. So how do I mentor a team to do X? How do I help an individual, for career progression, for example? Whereas allyship, in preparation for this, I looked up some definitions. So one that I like is allyship is the effort at advancing the interests of a minority group. So it's not targeted to the individual or to an outcome. It's more about elevating awareness and showing support in the collaboration of those groups. And I think two takeaways from a personal note I would have had at Genesis is, to be an ally, you don't have to be a subject matter expert. You don't have to know everything about the community or the topic that you're providing support for. That's not why you're needed. You're needed to work with that group, to understand their needs and to see where you can plug in and help using your skills or your network or your connections.
Excellent.
And I think the final piece is, often it's enough just to show up. Go to the group, go to the coffee mornings, go to the cinema nights. Just be there as a membership leadership team and show that you're there and present and not just talking about what I should be doing.
Excellent, thanks. Excellent answer. Laura, could I perhaps direct the same question to yourself in terms of Liberty IT's initiatives and which ones have been the most impactful within, or some examples within your organisation?
Sure, I think for us, I'm going to actually interview the fundamentals of allyship because I've heard it this morning. The professor this morning talking about value alignment. He talked about creating a sense of belonging. We talked today in our sessions about challenging bias and about, here we are, learning and sharing from one another. For me and for our team at Liberty, that's really the fundamentals of allyship. But how do we make that real? We have invested in training and in workshops to enhance our learning professionally and from a business point of view, in things like microaggressions, challenging the bias growth mindset. However, really where we are seeing the biggest impact of where we're truly winning hearts and minds and really driving impact is through our employee resource groups, or ERGs. One great example is actually very local here to Galway. We are just coming up on our first anniversary of having an office in Galway, and when we were thinking about where to expand our business to across Ireland, Galway for us was the clear winner, and it was two things. It was the fact that we had immense talent here, of which we've seen plenty of over the course of AtlanTec. But it was actually the sense of community, the real unique sense of community that Galway has here. And it is something that they welcome you to and into with open arms, but that they very much hold you accountable to participate and be active in. Within our ERGs, our STEM group is partnering with our technical leaders. We have partnered with Ideas Lab here at the university, with Code First, and we're really looking for opportunities where we can engage our teams, share that knowledge in terms of our innovation frameworks, in terms of our software and our architecture frameworks, to be able to inspire. So ultimately, I guess the impact that we have seen is much, much larger than just how allyship and active, consistent allyship can impact engagement across an organisation, but actually if we're doing it right, if we're doing it really truthfully, we can expand that right out to impact our local communities as well.
Excellent. So I suppose, Lorna, with all of the recognition you and Fidelity have received around diversity and inclusion initiatives, which ones within your own organisation would you say have been the most impactful? But also, I'd be interested in hearing what challenges has your organisation experienced in those initiatives, rolling out those initiatives, and how have you overcome those challenges?
Yeah, I think when you work for a company that has over 75,000 people globally, that brings lots of challenges because you're dealing with, much diversity of thought, right? So it brings challenges, but it also brings opportunities. And like what we've just heard, probably Fidelity started off with, establishing the employee resource groups and so forth. But I think allyship is certainly a newer term. I think the really important thing that I would say about allyship is it's not a self-professed label, and a lot of people, you start seeing pronouns out there and on Zoom, and they're like, she, her, hers, ally, and like that makes me cringe, because I think ultimately, it's like anything from a cultural perspective. It's how you make people feel, right? So at Fidelity, I suppose what we would have focused on is, looking at putting the right structures in place, and it's not just about layering on and saying, we're going to set up a number of employee resource groups. It's really looking very deeply in terms of your culture. So it comes back to ultimately what drives your culture. So, if I think about our mission statement at Fidelity, it's really about, improving the financial outcomes of our customers, right? So there's a business imperative in terms of how we think about inclusion and diversity. And I would always say inclusion comes before diversity, because with inclusion, that brings diversity into an organisation. It sustains diversity in an organisation. And, what we think very strongly about is, how do you think about layering that into everything that we do? What's the imperative? What's the strategy look like? And then, I suppose in recent years, we have to think about the different levels of maturity in the thinking across the globe. So bringing some, I suppose, centralised thoughts that really has top-down support. So I think about things like, we have an inclusive language guide, right? And that's something that, English is our lingua franca of the organisation, so that's something that, lots of our associates may not be their first language, so helping them understand that. And I suppose from an Ireland perspective, one thing we really focused on was, how do you know you're doing the right thing? So, we've worked with the Irish Centre for Diversity. They have a benchmark, which is called the Investor in Diversity Benchmark. And we've gone through the 3 phases of that. There's a bronze certification, which kind of looks at your internal structures,
Then there's a silver that looks at what do your associates think. So what you're doing is that just, what you say, does it reflect in terms of your actions and your deeds and how you lead the organisation. And then the third piece of it is, how does the outside ecosystem look at you? And that's everything from other companies to companies that you engage with, to suppliers and so forth. And in the last year we've achieved that benchmark. Now that's not an end game, that's a starting point that will evolve over time. So some of those challenges that we would face as a large organisation is you have to educate a huge number of people. And we would have started with some of the simple things like looking at unconscious bias, and we very quickly flipped that to looking at conscious inclusion. So it's back to where I started. I think everything starts with inclusion, because if you don't have inclusion, you don't have diversity. If you don't have diversity, there's really no need for allyship. And if you don't have the right structures in place, it doesn't sustain over time.
Okay. Yeah, no, I totally agree about starting with inclusivity. Certainly at Avaya, as part of the ERG structure, we try to host those inclusive talks and get the dialogue open and going to understand the different perspectives that we're working with. Gillian, can I ask from across industries, are you seeing the same kind of challenges, and what kind of initiatives are you seeing being most successful across industries?
Thank you. We're really lucky in Ireland that we have been looking at this agenda for quite some time. The 30% Club is in 20 chapters around the world, and we don't see the same progress elsewhere. But it's still a relatively new agenda. 10 years ago we weren't talking about this in Ireland, now we are. In terms of some of the challenges, the first thing is many organisations are finding this is quite a challenge to do. 10 years ago there was almost the idea, if we get our recruitment right and if we have some flag and cupcake days, everything will change. And as we've seen here from some of the great examples we've had already, that hasn't been the case. So Irish companies have realised that to do this properly, you have to put it on a proper footing. It is about culture, it is about policy, it is about process, it is about experience. And actually we found in the first couple of years, a lot of Irish companies felt they were doing all the right things, but the dial wasn't changing. Okay? So what we are starting to see organisations talking about now is the idea of, yes, diversity gives you the balance in your workforce. Inclusion means the voices are heard, but you have to focus on roles of influence, because there is no value having all your diversity just in one part of the organisation. Probably the second thing that we're seeing, and again, some of the early adopters love the idea of diversity and inclusion and allyship because they could see a competitive advantage. They realised very quickly that if they were the only ones investing in this competitive advantage, they just became feeders for everybody else. So what we're now seeing, particularly positive in Ireland, is the idea of collaboration. How do companies come together with groups like the 30% Club, Connecting Women in Technology, and sharing in a way where they might compete for products and services and customers, but they'll collaborate in terms of building talent. We're really starting to see the importance of collaboration between industry and academia, and industry and government. So many initiatives where organisations are saying, we want diversity, but it doesn't exist in the pipeline. So how do we get involved in STEM initiatives in school? And the third thing that we're seeing is that initial progress is easily won, but very easily lost. Particularly in senior roles, and this is where in Ireland we're now starting to talk about the gender power gap. So if I give you an example, 2 years ago Ireland was in the top quartile in the EU in terms of gender balance in CEO positions in listed companies. We were making what we thought was great progress. And 3 weeks ago, Ireland became one of just 2 countries in the EU that had no female CEOs on listed companies. And it just happened so easily and so quickly. And then we look at CSO data. Again, we're fortunate in Ireland. The government has now come behind collecting data, and the averages look great. But when you dial under the numbers, if we look at senior executives across companies in Ireland, 20% of companies operating out of Ireland have no women in their executive teams. And when I talk about gender, everybody says, well, why don't you talk about everything else? Gender is a majority issue, not a minority issue. And if we get gender right, it brings in so many different facets. But if we can't get gender right, and we think about some of the topics that have been covered this morning, like Gen AI, even the example this morning of, I'll put my hand up and a Cisco system will know that we're in agreement. If I'm from a culture or from a background where we don't do hand gestures, will I get left out, and will the end product for the customer be less than it could be because we haven't had diversity of thought in the room and we haven't had diversity of innovation in the room? But these are issues that we're seeing consistently across every sector, across every industry within the sector. It's not easy. You take your eye off the ball and it changes very quickly, and you can't do it by yourself. It really needs collaboration in terms of pipeline for Ireland Inc.
Okay, so really thought-provoking input there. I suppose, what strategic initiatives looking ahead then do companies need to look to apply to, I guess, restore some of that diversity of thought back into their organisation? So I'll kick off again.
Well, I keep going. And again, we're seeing similarities, and some of the examples are the ones that we've heard already. You know, thinking about training, that is much more about inclusivity rather than just raising awareness. But if I look at it more strategically, the types of things that we are seeing across the more progressive organisations, and I say this as a HR person for 40 years before I started to do this, we're starting to see the conversation moving out of HR and into the boardroom. Because companies that see this as a HR responsibility are not driving real change. The real change has to come from the top. It has to come from the chair. It has to come from the CEO. Now, luckily, things like gender pay gap reporting and pay transparency are putting an onus on boards and CEO teams to think about it. But the more progressive companies are saying, this is really important to our business and this is part of our culture. The second thing we're seeing is it being much more embedded into the business agenda, from a customer's perspective, from procurement. If you go in and have a conversation with professional services firms, they will not go in and make a pitch in the procurement process anymore without thinking about diversity in their presentation team. Because if they don't have diversity, they won't win the contract. We're seeing it in customer advertising. Lidl have a fabulous campaign at the moment about breaking the glass. Allianz have a great campaign at the moment around stop the drop in sport. So it's becoming much more part of the business agenda rather than just HR. And finally, we're seeing great conversations moving from fixing people, fixing the underrepresented to fit in, and instead the conversation is about how are we changing the system so that everybody can thrive. Because if you only focus on underrepresented groups, overrepresented groups can start to feel very worried and left out. So how do we change the system, not the people?
Excellent, thank you. So I just want to open that question out to any of the other panelists in terms of some strategies that you're looking to build on your existing diversity and inclusion initiatives to further encourage innovation and diversity of thought.
Yeah, I would agree with everything that Gillian has just said, and there's probably two things that we've done at Fidelity and continue to do. So totally agree taking it out of the HR space. So we actually appointed a head of diversity and inclusion a number of years ago, and that was an independent voice that sat at the board table. We had great sponsorship from the top. So we're a privately owned company, so we're kind of lucky we can kind of do some things that maybe in other companies where you're answerable to the shareholder, it can be a little bit more challenging. But it's something that's really, really important for our CEO. And one of the things that came out of that, and we talked about gender pay gap reporting. We started producing a diversity report, a publicly displayed one, and that was really to put pressure on, let's be very honest about what the situation is, but also be very honest in terms of what are the initiatives and how do you improve over time. And I think it's, a real breath of fresh air when you start seeing it. And a lot of the progressive big companies are doing that now. I think the other thing that, back to Gillian's point, so we're a very, very broad portfolio company, but in the same way as your green credentials are important, your D&I credentials are really important in terms of winning business. And I think anything that becomes a business imperative gets that attention at the boardroom level. And I think that's something that we see it all the time. So I see a couple of my colleagues in the front row there that work in our workplace investing business. And essentially what we're doing is managing the pension funds and the benefits for lots of other companies across the globe. And if Fidelity's culture is not, it's not aligned with their culture, you're never going to win that business. So I think it's really about having that sponsorship at the top of the house. So you can do lots of things organically. It's great to have groups within companies, but they don't have the voice to actually drive the change. So you have to get that top down as well as leveraging your bottom up. And I think you have to be really honest about the data. They will be the kind of two big things I would say.
Thank you. That leads me into my next question, and I'll direct this to yourself, Liam. What would be your one takeaway action or call to arms to this audience from today's discussion, or even from your own experiences?
Yeah, I think going back to Lauren's point about bottom up, I think we've talked about leadership and top down frameworks. I think one of the lessons I've learned in the last 2 years as we grew the site was that you tend to get the same people participating in the ERGs and in the sports and social. And the organisation recognises that that's key to our culture, it's key to talent acquisition, it's key to retaining talent. Yet many of our performance systems are based on task items or outcome-based things that don't account for that. So there's a couple of terms around that. One is non-promotive work that these people are doing, and in some cases it can even lean into they're worried about their promotable work and then the time impact maybe. And some great research in the University Business School here. That's actually called Organisation with Citizenship Behaviour, where you have these great champs, but they're giving nearly too much of themselves. So I think as an organisation and leadership team, my takeaway would be, we need to be intentional about recognising that work, be intentional about measuring it, and be intentional about rewarding those people.
And fully endorse that from my own experiences as well. There is a lot of unrecognised effort that goes on behind the scenes to have those events, set up those talks and etc. So it is important to recognise the individuals who contribute to trying to make that organisational workplace a more inclusive culture. Laura, what would your call to action be to the audience to build on what was said already?
Yeah, I totally agree with what you said. The recognition piece is really, really important. I think hopefully what we've chatted about today is that DEI is no longer nice to have. These are business imperatives, and I think what I would say is continue to invest time and money in this area, because it really can make huge strides in terms of culture and enhancing that diversity and leaning into really trying to drive real change in the statistics, startling statistics that you give us today. But also, as someone who's in quite a few ERG groups, it's a heck of a lot of fun. And it's a great way to build your network and a great way to build new friends, particularly as we are in a hybrid first culture now, and that's really difficult. So going back to that very first point about sense of belonging, this really does require your time and your investment.
Okay. Thank you. So I just want to check before we wrap up, is there any questions from the audience that anybody wanted to ask on this topic? Nope, okay. Thanks. So I just wanted to wrap up by saying I want to wish each of our panelists a really heartfelt thank you for your expertise and your energy and enthusiasm for this subject. I personally found it very enriching and enlightening with, as you said, some stark statistics. And I think the call to action is very clear that in organisations we need to recognise the importance of this and to support those individuals and recognise those individuals who are driving this. So once again, thank you to each of our panellists and thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Emer. That was just so interesting, wasn't it, about the opportunity that is presented by and the necessity of diversity in the workplace and enriching our workplaces and our communities. Before we break for lunch, I just wanted to say thank you again so much to you guys, but also to our excellent speakers and contributors over the morning session. Just so much to think about, so much food for thought, so much to discuss over lunch, I'm sure. It has been just really, really interesting. I've really enjoyed it. As for the afternoon session of the conference then, I just want to remind everyone we've lined up 3 separate tracks on AI, cloud and cyber. That's from 1:30 to 4:30. So for people who are interested in artificial intelligence, that AI track, that's going to continue right here in the Bailey Allen Hall. And then if you're keen on exploring cybersecurity and cloud technologies, you can head to the Human Biology building, which is just right next to this one, over there. And if anyone feels like some pizza and great conversation a little later on, and let's be honest, who doesn't, you can join all of us in the College Bar Sult. That's at 4:30 this afternoon. That'd be a really good opportunity to just connect with everyone, have a chat, and discuss what you've been hearing about today. So thank you all so much for joining us and enjoy your lunch.